Just so aware, so you are aware, we are recording. Brilliant. Oh, Alison, it looks like you're the only person I know on this list. I don't see Tony, I don't see Brent.
No, Tony gives his apologies.
Yeah.
And then Brent's the same.
Take it away.
Oh, thank you. So we've got so yeah, I'm Alison. I think I know most of you here. So I'm the strategic asset manager who's going to be trying to pull together the speed management program. We've got Shing Hao, who's one of our engineers, who's a specialist in the speed management program for technical questions. Direct this way, please. We're going to just give you a bit of an update on the process to date. A lot of you have been through this wonderful, exciting process that we've been through with a lot of change. So we thought it was worthwhile giving you a slight update on where we've got to. We'll talk through the two parts of the speed management changes. There's a couple of mechanisms that we'll be working to. So the purpose today is to update you on the setting of speed limits process, because there have been some changes, to provide an update on the current speed management program, and then to talk through some of the proposed speed changes and just work through what the list that we will take into consultation will look like. So yeah, here's a bit of a history. Those of you who were around in 2022, we actually went out for that in itself was quite a big process, and the previous government introduced quite a significant change in terms of the development of a speed management plan. The idea was to look at a 10-year horizon of the changes you wanted to make, with a real focus on the first 3 years. So it was really trying to ensure that we were taking a much more strategic approach to speed management. We were out for consultation in October 23, which was at the time of the election, the national election, which led to, obviously, the coalition government came into force. So they were almost diametrically opposed to the speed management rule that was set in 2022, and so set out a new 2024 rule. So that moved away from the 10-year plan. There were certain speed limits that we needed to review to see if they needed to be reversed, and we'll come to those in a little bit. It mandated the implementation of variable speed limits during schools. So if you remember, the intent was to make the speed limits around schools permanent, but they're now, ours were already variable. We were going to make them permanent, but now they'll be variable again. They actually introduced a new road classification system. So there had been a whole national consolidation of how we classify roads. And as part of the speed rule, they introduced a new Appendix 3, which introduced a separate classification that's only used for speed management. That is similar but slightly different to the national, the One Network Framework speed limit road classification. In addition, we now have to include a cost-benefit statement for each of the roads that we put out for consultation. So, yeah, we'll cover some of these points more as we go through. So one of the big changes, and there was a time limit on this, which we've now passed, that any roads that had been changed within a set period needed to be reviewed to see if that speed limit should be reviewed. So we basically had to go through all the speed limit changes that had happened. We then need to identify if they met the criteria. So did they meet the urban connector category under Schedule 3 of the new classification, and then work out when they were changed and why. And so we went through, there were 46 roads that potentially could have had amendments to their speed limits, but as we went through it, we determined that there were no that actually met that criteria. So that was submitted to NZTA and moved forward. So in 2023, sorry, were there any questions on the speed reversals? Please just ask as we go along.
Keep going, Alice.
Cool. So in 2023, we had a vision and a principles, and so the 2022 plan, which was 22-23, was really trying to get some consistent approach to the way that we had speed limits. I guess there's a lot of commentary from from the general public that, sometimes you never quite know what the speed limit should be, and we were trying to get that network consistency. So new roads, new urban areas, what kind of speed environment, just to get that consistency with a focus on where we have vulnerable users. Let's try and make sure that that's where we're lowering the speed limit where it makes sense. So there was a focus on those safe school zones. We were trying to make them permanent, and then town centres and shared spaces. So we've seen a lot of capital works and improvement to the network, and we're trying to encourage that mixed use of traffic on the network. And so we were trying to make sure that those areas were kept people safe. So we went out to consultation, and it was a real mixed bag of consultation. We had, again, we talk about that diametrically opposed approach. We've got some very strong people supportive of what we were trying to do with safer speeds around the network, and also another portion of the district that were, keen to see that we keep the speed limits high. So we went through that, and in this new plan, there's quite a number of speed limit changes that we've taken from the consultation. We've listened to this feedback, taken into the new plan, and we'll talk about some of those as we go through a bit more detail. So we really liked having a vision and principles in our speed management plan, bearing in mind that we don't have to have a vision, we don't have to have principles, and we don't have to have a speed management plan. But actually, it's a mechanism that we can still utilise, and it just allows us to be much more clearer about what are we intending to do with speed limit. Why is it a tool that can make our roads safer? And so we've tried to simplify the principles a little bit so that perhaps it's more understandable, because that was some of the feedback. Is what does network consistency mean? Well, we're trying to call it support consistent speeds, and just trying to change the language to make it easier for the public to interpret what we're intending to do. So yeah, hopefully they make sense to people. We're trying to be fairly pragmatic about our approach. So open to take some feedback. So we talked about how we make, the way that we make speed limit has changed over time. We had a bylaw previously where that was how we made speed limit changes. In 2022, that moved into a national speed limits register, which meant that we still had to go out for consultation and get that community feedback. But instead of the mechanism being the bylaw, it's now through a process that the speed management plan would be approved by council, and then it would go to the Director of Transport and NZTA to approve them and then put them into the National Speed Limits Register. So with this, there's always been two processes. There's the alternate method, which is slightly less onerous, and then there's the speed management plan, which is very similar to the last process. So for the school changes, we're proposing that we use the alternate method, because a lot of these were highly supported in the previous consultation. Most of them are in place already. There's a few tweaks that we just want to make to the, some new schools that have come in. And it just means we don't have to go out to public consultation, because it's really just, we hope, mostly common sense. So we've had some, and we'll be doing some further engagement with the schools to make sure that the extent of the zones are covered, and we will then be submitting to the transport directors for approval, and then, so we will take that to council meeting in October. So we'll be presenting the option for the list for the proposal for alternate method and for the speed management plan.
So just on the consulting with the schools.
Yeah.
So every school will get a engagement. So every school will be asked for their concerns about where the extent of, I'm just trying to understand.
So probably not the ones that have already got speed limit zones in place. I think the intention is
so the intention is to engage with the schools who get kind of involved in the process.
Yeah.
Because the previous schools, if they got any feedback, they should be already submitted to us in the previous consultation.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got a mix of current electronic variable speed limit signs and some static variable speed limit signs. So depending on the environment will be what would end up being implemented. So you'll see some that have the flashing signs when the school zone is applicable. Some of them just have the usual static sign, which is
what determines
lower risk.
What determines which one is applied?
So it can be determined by the traffic volume on the road. So usually we have the electronic signs used when the traffic volume is very high, and it can be mixed environment outside the school gate as well. But on kind of the set streets from the school, we will potentially use the static signs because they are kind of cost effective in that way. Yeah.
I guess my only concern is that we'd be choosing, presumably the councillors around the table, the alternative method, which is not to go out to public consultation. And I'm just wondering if there are any schools that would prefer to change what they have at the moment, but won't be aware of the opportunity to do that, or won't have the opportunity to do that through the alternative method. That's all. And I don't know whether that's a thing or not, but I'm just...
We've been out to a number of schools, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
We can certainly make a proactive approach to all the schools, if that, to be really clear about what the process would be.
And whether there are any, whether there's, because they might be happy with what they have currently, but you won't necessarily have heard if they're not, because they won't be aware of a chance to address any issues, and that might slip by. That would be my only comment.
Yeah. Okay. Can we take that one offline? I'll come back to just confirm what the
Absolutely.
approach will be for that. But we'll certainly make a proactive attempt to reach out to all the schools to talk to them about what's happening, and then if we need to change that approach, we can.
So some of the electronic ones that are in place though currently, are they currently 40k an hour ones that need to be reduced to 30k an hour? I think Te Kura Whakatapu Kauro has electronic signs, but I think they might say 40k's an hour, do they?
Yeah, I think there is a mix.
Because it's the one that's on the side that says no existing VSL, but we just went past there the other day and noticed the signs, and the comment we made was that because it was during the middle of the school day, it didn't actually apply because it wasn't in the hours of the variable limit, even though there was a school bus there with kids getting on and off it. But I think it was 40k's an hour. Would that be right? And it needs to be changed.
Sorry, which school is that?
At Hamley's Farm.
Oh, Hamley's Farm.
Yeah, so if there's a 30 or a 40 already existing, we're not intending to change it.
Right. Okay, well, the only reason I ask is it's on the slide that says no existing VSL.
But you're saying that there is.
It does.
So it might be physically in place, but not necessarily a legal speed limit.
Right.
That could be the distinction.
And that's because all of Hamley's Farm doesn't have a legal speed limit, though, does it?
Yeah, that's true.
It's all 100
we
k's an hour.
did put in some variable speed limit signs when they built the road, but they are not like legal speed limits yet.
Because I remember when we did that speed review last year,
Yeah.
that was the comment then, is that all of Hamley's Farm is actually legally 100 k's an hour.
And some of them have been, we'll actually touch on that in a few slides. Yeah, no, that's all good. Okay, so do you want to do the next slide?
Okay, yeah, sure. So talking about the draft speed management plan 2026, we do have 4 different focus areas in the plan. So we will go through each individual ones in details in the coming slides. But just talking about the overall process first. So we are having this council workshop today and taking all your feedback now to draft the SMP in September, and we plan to come back to you guys in September for another report or workshop.
So we are intending to go back to Infrastructure Committee, though, rather than come back to full workshop, just to confirm the final list before it goes to full council meeting to get approval for consultation with the full list.
So current plan is we will come back again in October for approval to go to public consultation, and the public consultation will take 6 weeks in November, December time frame, and early next year after we receive all the public consultation feedback, we will come back again for the final SMP and then go to the director's approval early 2026 and hopefully implement the changes made 2026. So it will take kind of almost a year time to complete the whole SMP.
Assuming everything goes to plan. I'm glad that this is a very
So the first focus area we have will be on the new roads and developed areas. There are many developments happening across the district, and we want to ensure the new zones and roads have a safe speed limit in place already once they open to public. So the listed here will be coming from our existing resource consent, and we expect those changes will be coming in the next 3 years' time. So for urban residential zones, we plan to set the speed limit of 40 km/h. Kawaro Heights is a big special case. It originally kind of zoned for like a retirement village. But later it got changed to residential housing. So 30K was proposed and approved in the resource consent, and we currently have 30K speed limit signs and road markings already. So we want to propose continue keeping the 30K on the roads because the subdivision is quite isolated in short over. So we propose to keep that, but we will try to avoid the same situation happening in our urban areas. So when resource consent coming in, we need to be very carefully adjust on their speed limits. We want to make sure the roads are designed with appropriate operating speeds, but consistent speed limit in the area. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, question. So, I mean, part of this comes down to design philosophy, though, because if you look at Kirimoko in Wanaka, for instance, is that they designed some shared spaces and they've equally got some very low spec. I don't know what they are. They're on 30 or less, actually. They could be even less than that, but they're designed as shared spaces, whereas if you're designing, you know, as you said, your goal is to design roads that are appropriate for 40, it's the other way around. So I just wonder how is that applicable in all cases when we've got different design philosophies occurring?
So I guess there's a certain leeway through the development code of practice to apply what that design environment would look like, and we're through the speed management process just trying to encourage, you know, consistent approach. So I think we're still open that if there was a need to have lower speed limits in those environments, then that can still happen.
So as Kirimoko's got a current different limit anyway, is that an authorised one, or you don't know?
Oh, I need to come back and confirm that. We can come back and confirm that.
Yeah, the point is that may apply in a number of areas where they've deliberately designed an environment as low speed environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have some development area which currently have a slightly lower speed limit, but I think most cases they are legal speed, but those 30K special cases actually not the legal speed limit yet, so it's not enforceable.
Okay.
So we just want to kind of legalize that speed.
I suppose that if we're breaking it down into consistency, like, you know, yes, the default, for want of a better term, is 40, but, you know, then there might be a low speed environment that we have as a lesser limit. And you identify those, but anyway, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's still, you know, the operating speed, the design can lead to a low operating speed, but then also if there was a need to have a clearly defined shared space, then that would have a lower speed.
I suppose my point is we don't want some that are 15, some that are 30,
No,
some that are 25, some that are 35. We want some consistency,
Yeah.
And Victoria Flat is a rural industrial area, and we currently propose 60 km/h for that.
That's
and once again, is that
development.
because it's a rural industrial area?
Yes.
So you're applying the same in the Luggett rural industrial area?
Yeah, so normally for
Like Church Road.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, if that's your criteria, because it's rural industrial, are you applying that consistently?
Yeah, we're trying to. I mean, we haven't proactively, for the speed management plan, we haven't gone out to find a number of problems, but it means that having this consistent approach will enable us to rectify those if we need to.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the problem is you might have pushback in Luggett on that because it's effectively the highway environment versus Victoria Flats, so, okay.
And look to the Queenstown Town Centre, 10 kilometers per hour is proposed for our shared zones where we have lots of pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles share the road, and also for our camping ground. 30 kilometers per hour is proposed for our parking streets where we have very high parking turnover demand and also pedestrian volume.
And so some of these are, have been where the physical improvements have happened through the town centre upgrades or, part of the street upgrades generally. So they're in place now. We will be giving a list of all of the individual proposed speed changes after the end of the meeting, and we'll talk to that, give you an opportunity to provide individual feedback. But this is just to take you through some of the intent.
Cool. And the roads was new cycle infrastructure. We're proposing to reduce the 100 kilometer per hour speed limit to 80 along Elegance Road because we got the shared path along the road and is also consistent with the nearby network. We are also proposing extend the current 40K along golf course intersection. Golf course intersection with Cardrona Valley Road to cover the pedestrian crossing, the shared path location, and also the retirement village section.
So just to clarify, there was some confusion about this one. So directly, once you pass the retirement village entrance, you would return back to 70?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
right.
Yeah. So we are just extending the 40 to cover up the intersection, crossing, and also the retirement village to about the first property on the right.
Can I just ask a question related to signage? What is there like a formal distance that there has to be between each sign that's telling you the speed? So like if the speed changes on a road over 3 kilometres or something, how regularly do you have to actually have the signs up to tell you what the speed is?
Yeah, so currently we don't have a maximum length that we need to put in repeater signs now, but in the past, I think for rural corridors, we intend to do it every 1 to 2 kilometers, but it was under the previous requirement. Currently, we don't have any requirement now, but for locations, we know people exceeding the speed limit, we do want to put in like repeater signs to tell the driver what's the speed limit.
Yeah, I do think it's quite a problem actually. There's some roads that hardly have any.
Yeah.
And you can't tell if they're like an 80 or 100, and it's quite challenging to know, and especially because there have been lots of changes as well.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely consider that when we are designing the signs for the
And once we've finalised the list of roads to be changed, we'll be coming up with an implementation plan. So, that'll be sort of, 9 to 12 months' time. And then we'd be identifying where we need to put in the new signs, where, particularly around the schools, whether it be electronic or static, and what kind of, would there be a need for threshold treatments, for example, to kind of make it a visual reminder that you're going into a different speed zone.
It did occur to me when you had the Queenstown Town Centre zonings, if you like, there was Lakeview and there's Brecon Street and there was the Camp Street, Beach Street shared zone and stuff. There's a lot of transitions there, which means there's a lot of signs.
Yeah.
So I think there's sort of you've actually got to think about the implementation and go, well, if you create a zone, you want to minimise the number of times you come in and out of that zone and do it at natural points. And the same with, I just think we end up with a lot of transitions and subsequently a lot of signs. And I've got to be super careful about that.
Well, hopefully if we have some consistency, that the public should actually be able to learn to know what to expect, right?
Oh,
Because I think that's part of the issue is that
it should be sort of self-evident, but you should be going, I'm entering
Yeah.
You know, you turn off Stanley Street into Ballarat Street, and you know that that's the point you're changing into the shed, the one time you're changing into a different environment, not 3 times, you know. So anyway, it's
And on that, I'm just interested in just going back a slide, just Park Street. Then it hasn't extended, you know, did you consider extending it down to the end of the cycle trail? Because you've got a very short stretch of one road that's going down to 30 from 40, where you're probably going to drive that speed anyway, but then it's not extended along the cycle path, which, like, in terms of rationale.
Yeah, I guess we've just aligned it with the physical works project that happened with the alliance.
But is that a rational decision is that a good reason when it comes to driving it after the fact? Just because we did some works there doesn't mean that that's the right bit to.
We take a note for that.
Because there needs to be, the community will say, well, why? And if that's your answer, it'll be like, well, that's not logical, the works are done. You know, is it because we have cyclists? Is it because we have parked cars backing out? What's the reason?
Yeah, okay, we can certainly consider that. Maybe extending
And it might be useful for the cycling.
Yeah. Yeah, because it does link up to that.
It does,
link.
and there's
probably is
no good
similar.
trail there, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess it falls into that definition of areas with high cycling and walking demand, because there are the share arrows on Park Street, share arrows for that section from there down to the start of the trails.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, definitely.
okay, cool, thank you.
And my question is about the transition from Northridge Road past Littles into Arthur's Point. Where does it switch down to 50? Would it go 80, 70, 50? You can take that offline, but I'm just not quite sure what that transition does.
Yeah.
I thought it dropped down slower after Littles into a 50.
Yeah, we can check that one. So we've got,
So what happens between Northridge and?
100.
170 to 50.
So it goes 170, 50, but we're now talking 80, 70, 50.
Yeah.
So it's again, those transitions,
yeah.
just at the instead of that.
We have got a map that we'll share with you, like a interactive map. So when we give you we'll give you a list of all the proposed changes, but they're also in a map that you can have a look at, and we're keen to get your feedback.
And because I think Arrowtown Lackhouse Road coming up to Arrowtown,
70.
that is 70.
Yeah.
So again, we've sort of got 70, 80. It's that consistency piece that
Going back down McIntyre Hill, it's 70.
70. I've had a ticket there. I know that.
Actually, and then
That'd be the only one.
then there's the Glenorchy with the new trail going from Whakaari down to G1.
Yes, we talk about the road in a bit.
Sorry.
No, that's right.
Keep going on.
And I just worth chatting to the Tracks Trust too, because they probably don't want to be seen as unintended consequences of great assets that they've provided for us as well. So we just need to be clear if that's in line with them or not.
And moving on to the high-risk corridors that we have. So we also targeting the feedback that we have received from the public and the local board. So Windmill Corner is one of the high-risk location we have in the district. You can probably tell by the newspaper titles. Numbers crash have happened in that corridor. So we are proposing to reduce the speed limit from 100 to 60k from the southern end of the two banks all the way to past the school. And also we are investigating some engineering treatments to support this change and also improve the pedestrian crossing on the road. And how we affect speed zone currently is 60-100. It will change to 30-60 variable speed limit if the permanent speed limit got lowered. Any questions? Cool. And from the previous consultation, we have received a lot of feedback on the on Bob's Cove, and we propose to lower the speed limit from 100 to 80 from Clinton to Glenorchy with 260 k zones for Wilson Bay and Bob's Cove for the rural settlements area. Those will be the longest section of change in our proposal. And but given the very narrow road for sections and also the current road environment, we think the time impact on those changes actually fairly minimal.
So that's the whole Glenorchy Road from 100 to 80?
Yeah, entire section from the Fernhill roundabout to Glenorchy, the 40K section.
Can expect some feedback on that one, I suppose. Yeah.
Just
Interesting.
so another side note from, and given that some of those have come from the community associations and stuff. So at the last Regional Transport Committee, there was sort of signal that they're doing, NZTA are doing a targeted review of speed limits across the region, but with a bit of questioning, it revealed there wasn't any science to that. It was just filling a few holes, if you like, that have come about, but they haven't invited input as such in order to develop that program. So I suppose the point being is that if we want NZTA to address Luggett or wherever, then we're probably going to have to proactively put that to them, and they did informally invite that we could submit those to us. So maybe we go through our channels, we invite comment when you're doing it with the schools, for instance. We also invite comment from the Residents Association that we can in turn pass on to NZTA if it's appropriate.
Yeah, no, we can do that. Same in the consultation document, say this is not covering state highways, but this is the
But it was sort of,
mechanism to do it.
I think we need to be the catalyst to do that and pass that on through to NZTA. They are prepared to look at them, but yeah, there wasn't any science to it.
We have made those comments in the past, and then the Local Association have asked us numerous times to do so. Yeah, but if there are others that councillors are aware of, we can certainly do that as well.
Yeah.
Just on that 100 to 80, is there just going back to previous workshops, 90 isn't a thing? Is it still like, we need to keep it in these 180? Because it's a big jump from 100 to 80, and there's going to be some serious feedback on that. I get it, you drive to the conditions, and I'm a slow driver, so I can quite happily cope with 80. But once upon a time, I would have thought it's a long drive, and it's a really good road in sections. So it'd be good to, the community's going to want to know why, and why it can't be 90. Rather than, if you wanted to drop it, why drop it 20 k's an hour?
Yeah, so for rural corridors, we try to just use 60, 80, 100, so keep the 20 kilometers per hour gaps in between, so we don't have that many changes in speed limit.
Are we allowed to do 90?
We do allow to do 70 or 90, but they previously considered just as entrance speed limit, which means the road has some issue, you just reduce the speed limit for the entrance period, and then you upgrade the road to a higher standard in the speed limit.
I guess so. I mean, my point would be probably, can we not give them options? Because you may get a whole lot of people say, no way to 80, you reduce it to 90, and you make it, that's fair. But to have options in the consultation document would mean it's not just a flat out no or just a thought, because it's a big jump for. I get that parts of the road, and I know you don't want to change it, but I would say where the cycle trail is from Whakaari down to the township could definitely go down to 80 or lower.
Yeah. Okay. No, we can take that one on board and have a think about how we can play with that.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. And rural intersection speed zones is introduced at the Cardrona Skatefield access. So when vehicle waiting at the access way to turn into the main road, the electronic 60K sign will be active, and reduce the speed limit on the main road to 60k. And so it gives a little bit more reaction time to drivers, and
That's
also
already in place. Isn't it?
yeah, that's
It's
already
just not
in
a
place.
legal speed limit.
Yeah, we just
Okay,
couldn't
take it.
enforce it for now, and we are also exploring more this option for more high-risk intersections in the district, because there's a cost-effective treatment comparing with a full intersection upgrade.
That whole, well, from the Crown Range side of Cardrona through to that point's a bit strange, because you go 50, you go 100, well, what is it? 100?
Coming out of Cardrona towards the Crown Range peak, it's like 40, 50, that you
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
take on for ages, and then it's just an open.
Yeah, well, there's a weird transition there, and then you go back to 80, then you go to 60, and then you go back to 100.
I don't know if you wanted to.
Sorry, I'm just gonna, the question was, can we tidy that up somehow? Because we 100, 50, 40, 80, 60,
100, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can have a look at
It's
that
just
one.
still.
It's just weird.
And then you're driving through Cardrona and you get overtaken. It's like,
There's quite a lot of action going on with the participants who are online, so I don't know if you wanted to
We can't see these. so-
No, yeah, a lot of comments.
do it so that you can see them, because, or
I
if
can see
anyone has
them.
any questions.
I can see them, so that's okay.
Okay,
Got lots of suggestions around speed limits on the chat.
yeah.
If they've got their hand up, I can see them.
Can you-
I think, and George is tracking them as well, so
okay.
we'll catch
Is
all
there
of
anything
those.
we need to pick up?
Can you do a bit more?
Yeah, well,
Speed
feels a
limit,
bit like that, yeah.
Are there any that we want to address on these particular slides? I can't see what the commentary.
No, keep going. I'll jump in
Oh.
if someone's got their hand up.
Thanks. And we are proposing to increase the speed limit for two sections of the road. One is Domain Road in Lake Hawea, where the current is 40 kilometers per hour. We propose to increase it to 50, continue to Cemetery Road along the urban boundary. The reason for that is because there are very limited development along the western side of the road. And we have like an off-street sheep path along the end. Probably couldn't see much urban development along the roads, but we're proposing to increase it from 40 to 50.
Once again, I think we need to view that area. Cody's got a question too, which I'm sure will be similar, but we've got to probably look at that a little bit more holistically, because at the moment we have parts of Cemetery Road which are deemed to be rural roads, but are jammed between two urban developments because they haven't acknowledged the SHA and so there's some inconsistency. We need to treat that area a bit more holistically and start to come up with a better plan there, because it's a bit weird.
Okay, Cody.
Yeah, appreciate taking on the feedback. One thing I was just going to ask is whether or not we are doing 50s, because I hear that we're doing 60s and 40s. And so just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, 50s.
Because we said we were doing even numbers, 50s and on.
Sorry. This is like well, I think this zone is still part of the urban network. That's why I think 50k is more appropriate for the road environment. And I did check the operating speed along that section. Currently, the operating speed is 45 to 50. So it actually was it's kind of below the proposed speed limit. So that's why we select this.
Would there be scope as well to look at Valentine Road in front of the police station for the same reason? Because there's not a residential entrance across that stretch from State Highway 84 up to Golf Course Road.
Yeah, I did have a look at that section. There is a bit more complex comparing with Domain Road, because we have I think we got early childhood education not nearby. We got a couple major intersections and also crossing from the sheep path at that location as well. Yeah, so it will be a little bit more like thoughts need to be considered for that section. Yeah, but certainly more complex comparing with this section.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, just continue on the slide. Murchison Road is a cul-de-sac, very short cul-de-sac street in 5 Mile shopping area. Again, this is one example that I think the 20K introduced when the road got open to public. The signs was there but got removed recently, so we want to kind of formal this change on the network. Yeah.
I never even knew it was called Murchison Road.
Next
Yeah,
time we're
see, for the car park by the pub.
40Ks, we're looking at the road.
Yeah.
So one of the new things we have to include in the consultation is this cost benefit disclosure statement, which actually held.
Oh, yeah. So for every proposed change we're making today, excluding the ones in the new developments or the schools, they will all have a cost benefit disclosure statement. The statement will assess the impact for the change considering the safety outcomes, the travel time, and also the implementation cost. And this document will be part of the consultation as well.
Just in terms of those inputs,
Yeah.
I'm assuming for a big road like the Glenorchy Road, mean travel time is not probably an input. Because I'm just thinking, there are sections where you can go fast, and there are obviously sections where, despite the 100K zone, you'll go a lot slower because you're driving to the conditions. So just doing a mean if you're using a mean to support and say, well, across your whole trip, you're going to be doing 80Ks, therefore we can reduce the whole thing, it's not going to make much difference. Well, that logic doesn't stack up. So I just thought I'd mention that and a couple of other things. The other things would be, because I'm thinking of the Glenorchy Road, because I know it. If you're talking about crash data, community's going to come back and go, did you grit and CMA our roads? Were those crashes in winter or were they in summer? We need to be really careful that our inputs aren't logical and that we understand what's driving those things, because the community will say it's not our speed that's driving them, it's potentially the way you're managing the road in winter and those sorts of things. So just if we could be aware of what the feedback's going to be back and think about whether our inputs are sensible and whether they're nuanced enough, I think that would be helpful in terms of getting calm feedback that isn't trashing our process but is actually focused on the outcomes and the issue. That makes sense.
So at the moment, we're just going through the process of collating the data and looking through that. But I think that's a good point about looking at the sections, the whole road, or break it down into sections that we think could change or not change. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Then, you look at 40Ks of Glenorchy Road, and one of the outputs is the increase or decrease in average individual vehicle trip times. I don't imagine there will actually be that much different. By 20 km/h reduction in the maximum speed limit.
So we sort of covered what the next steps are. So the alternate method for the proposed school changes, and then the speed management plan, two slightly different pathways. But as to your point, we'll have a look and see, make sure we do that engagement with the schools.
Thank you.
So the intention, this will come to the last council meeting of this council.
Or to go for the request to go out for consultation. Yeah, we've checked with government and they were happy that it wasn't a decision. So the actual
just
the consultation.
Yeah, and then the consultation will happen around November-ish, and then I guess it'll be the new council that will be making the decision to adopt the plan after post consultation.
Well, my only comment on that is that don't underestimate how politically sensitive this topic is, and that I don't know if that's the wisest thing, that this is the last.
It'll be the last,
it's only 2 days. It's the last 2 days.
Exactly.
I think we can swallow that one.
and it's consultation.
Is that it?
I mean, just
Yeah, sorry.
before we obviously, I think one of the things that Danny and the team put up is the sort of the idea to try and create more predictability and consistency. So had a lot of feedback, and that's really, really helpful. But I mean, obviously it's going to be a balancing exercise between nuancing every small section of road and getting a sort of a more smoother and generic set of speeds across the district.
Well, because one of the questions that came up before was about the Narrowtown Lake Hayes Road. And I know that was one of the things we were looking at last year under the old rule, was trying to iron some of that out. And then, of course, all that got put on hold, didn't it?
Yeah.
Latest GPS, whatever. So is any of that still possible under this?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. What will, that's a good, can you make a note about that, Narrowtown Lake Hayes Road, just to make sure that we did capture those changes, because we did look at that.
Because we spent a bit of time talking about those different speed limits,
Yeah.
and they keep changing, trying to rationalise it a bit.
Well, I think that's right, because I think the thing that confuses people the most is they say, I didn't realise that the speed had changed on the same bit of road.
Yeah. And that comes back to, Esther's question about what reminders do people
Yeah,
have
that's
along the way.
right.
One of the things I remember when I first went to the UK was they have the very small signs all along the road that tell you what the speed limit is. There's the big ones where it changes, and then little reminders every
We're very
kilometre.
forgetful in the UK.
That's a really good idea though.
They are really good. Sometimes if you miss the sign, you think, oh, what is the speed limit here? And,
You have a modern car with a
or a commercial car with E-roads on it.
Oh, E-roads.
Yeah, it tells you what the speed limit is. It's great.
So we have,
And it reminds you too when you go.
we have included just a little bit more information, perhaps to give you a bit of context so that you can, when you take this away and maybe, have a think about what other changes you'd like. So this is just the classification, appendix of what the kind of the expected speed limit ranges should be for the type of road. There's a link to the setting a speed limit rule if you so wish. So might want to, you can't sleep at night. And then what we'll do is post this meeting, we'll circulate the list of all of the proposed speed limit changes. So you'll see there's an example of what we'll be providing, the current and the proposed speed limit changes. And then there'll be an interactive map where you can see that kind of same table will be on the map as well. And then you can turn off layers that tell you what the current, I think some of you would have seen this very similar to the map that we put out with the consultation last time. And what we would really like is if you have any feedback, at some point we have to draw a line in the sand and say we're going to take changes up until this point. So we've requested that by Friday the 15th, if you could email any changes to the road safety email address on the slide, and then that will allow us to review all the speed limits before we come back to Infrastructure Committee with the draft, with the proposed list of changes to go into the consultation. And then you've got that opportunity to review those and send us through anything that we've missed, because actually there is a lot in this, and I certainly wouldn't expect you guys to give feedback just ad hoc now. So please do take the time and just let us know, and it would also be really good if there are things that you do support as well that you see, rather than just things that we've missed.
Sorry.
That's all right. I think that's it. Oh yeah, and so one that I would like to talk about, I think it did come in from the email from Cody and Lyle. So Valentine Road is a difficult one, and look, as a resident of the Upper Clutha myself, it is a very frustrating road to drive onto. We're really uncomfortable with lowering the speed limit at this point in time. It was a road that was upgraded by both NZTA and QLDC based on a fatality, and that road was designed at a speed limit due to the cost of construction. And from my perspective and a lot of others, that it would not, we're not doing justice to the process that upgrade went through to then come back and say, actually, well, now we've built the road, let's increase the speed limit. We had that option to build it to a higher level of specification for a high speed limit. And it would have cost...
We didn't have to correct that, we didn't have that option.
Well, no, because it would have cost $2 million more to
we
do it.
We didn't have that option because NZTA wouldn't have provided any money to us.
The money wasn't available. No, sorry, I didn't mean to say it was an option. It was a pathway that we could have taken, but it just wasn't. It was cost prohibitive. So
council could have chosen to spend more of its own money, but it chose not to. So
and NZTA were not supportive.
NZTA kept out what they were prepared to support. So it was a bit of a no-win option in some respects.
Yeah.
And that's the design we've got.
Yeah. So we haven't excluded it for just no reason. I just wanted to give a bit of context on Valentine Road. Yeah. I know it's one that often gets mentioned.
It is, it's a tricky one to defend because it is effectively almost the highest standard rural road in the district with the lowest speed limit, which is a hard one to.
Yeah, I remember that debate. You probably remember that debate well, that we ended up with this incongruence between older roads that were actually
Unsealed roads.
unsealed,
Well, I was gonna
poorly
say-
designed, but being at a higher speed.
The Harrier back road has a higher speed limit than the.
Yeah.
And there's an argument that should we review that, but I think that's probably that's the idea of the 10-year plan would be maybe to flag that we're not trying to do everything with this particular speed management plan. We're trying to make sure that we've got legal speed limits on the road that are appropriate based on a lot of the capital works and items that have happened, and just a bit of a tidy up. And I think we're planning to do a speed limit review probably every 3 years, and so we would like to move to increasing that consistency throughout the network as we go through this process. Thank you. Any other questions? And then, yeah, please just send us those emails, and please, as much information as you can. If you do say, I want this change to happen, don't just say, I want it to happen. Please, if you've got maps showing the extent, showing the reasons, because it might be that there's a school or maybe not a school, but there's a reason or a piece of the network that we don't know about, which will really help the story and the evidence for why a speed limit change should happen or not.
Thanks, Sarah. Just ask anyone online.
I had a quick question about just that Valentine Road while it's up there, and I appreciate the context. Was that fatality when the road was unsealed?
Yeah, that was part of the driver for the upgrade onto that road.
Yeah, once again, I think we've got to be a little bit careful that it was road safety was a contributor. That accident wasn't the driver. There was, there were a couple of incidents over a period of time, but there was a whole business case around, the sealing of this road. So I think we're going to be careful not to connect it to a specific incident, or there was a whole case and a whole process. I mean, we spent 5 years on this, didn't we, or something, Ferg? I don't know.
Long time.
We spent a long time getting to a point and going, I mean, I sat in on business case meetings and all sorts of stuff. It's a long road. It's so to speak, a long road. It was a long road, and we've just got to be careful that we don't overstay.
I appreciate the history, but I think people don't see 5 years of hard work when they drive on the road. They sort of see, oh, that doesn't make as much sense as something else. So I'm not saying that it's not valid. I'm just saying that there is a lack of intuition for most people to drive at that speed, and it's not a story you can tell on a sign on the road. So I just know it'll be a point of contention for the community in consultation, but I appreciate the context in the background. Thank you.
That wasn't my argument. It was about whether it was caused by a fatality. Yeah, the change was caused by a fatality. But look, I think there is a case that could go to 80 and be very safe at 80. But that's
70. I like the in-betweens. I don't get the 20k jumps.
Okay, brilliant.
Anyway,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks.
About 7 minutes
Really
for the next
helpful,
one.
actually. It's really good.
Thanks, Wanaka Community, Upper Queeth Community Board.
With your permission.
Oh, yes, you're going to have to do a rearranging.
We do.
You're going to have to make
Rearranging.
Getting the phone.
Is that right? I'll sit here because I'm going to talk to this board behind me. I'm a bit awkward for you. It could be close. Yeah, you're probably right there, yeah. And then I need the...
You can pin the tail on the dog tail.
Yeah. Is that the right tail? Yes, it is. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. You okay? Yes. Yeah. Thanks, John.
Coding is going to do it when I was sick the other day, he was saying, needs any help from me. Like, what is it's that little lever. Some days it'll be better.
Sometimes. outside. Yeah.
Okay.
Does. Can everybody see that on the screen?
Do we need to see the wheelie thing?
Just have to
We
wait.
don't need to see.
Not yet.
No.
We'll get to that.
Just hold off for a minute, Gary.
Chicken layout, you know, seating arrangements.
Independent should be. Stuart might be joining.
Yeah, we'll have to hold for about 5. We finished early and,
Oh,
yeah.
Give us
So
some like hints.
just yourselves, yeah.
do you want
Oh,
me
the
to
hint
pins
is
handed
different.
out? Oh yeah, let's do that. I'll do the handing out. That's a good idea.
Plenty to talk about.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
All Black squad, New Zealand team.
I need a promise though, if I hand these out, we're not going to get distracted.
Don't hand them out yet then, because everyone runs.
There we go, I'll leave them with you.
Oh, well, we've got a lot of.
And then you can hand them out when you're ready. They're only our risk management policy, you see.
Yeah.
Because I was expecting a bigger turnout.
Are Heath and Bill coming along or not?
That's why we're waiting for 5 minutes.
Okay, Stuart definitely
Thank
said he
you
was
for
going to.
the level of preparation that I can see.
Oh, actually, thank you for doing that. That was way after deadline. And not probably as well thought through as I thought.
And actually, while we're waiting, we should probably introduce Ros for anybody that's not met Ros, because to be fair, she's done most of the prep. So thank you, Ros. Ros is Catherine's EA.
Yeah.
Is it the most enjoyable thing you've done since you've been here?
Oh.
During these circles?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think Ken Bailey thought that I'd gone absolutely crazy.
And just to be clear, we're now recording these things, right? So these will be up on the website.
It's recorded?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Just different kind of format, for, you know, getting up and about, we lose ourselves in the game.
Is it better with alcohol or without this game?
I can't possibly answer that question.
There's more risk.
There is
presumably,
more
with
risk, that's the
alcohol.
right answer. Yeah, I should have said there's more risk.
But maybe more, but maybe more free flowing.
I mean, oh yeah.
Maybe more free flowing
Yeah,
thoughts.
yeah.
I've decided.
More creative.
Nikki was complaining about a lack of colour in her.
Oh.
Oh.
I do have enhancements.
Or more about email than that.
It's all right, it's much more cost effective just to have black Sharpies.
I don't know about that. Okay.
You nervous?
You
are, aren't you?
I'm kidding me.
Yeah.
Well, this was like, you know, I keep raising this tier 1 risk of ineffective governance and wishing that we could actually have a discussion about it. And I'm like, will I get to? Will I get to? I was told I would get to. Yes. The opportunity to slide away from us. That's not what I was expecting. Did you see it?
Yeah. I think so.
I lost it.
Yeah. you in. Yeah.
Usually it's Stuart.
Yes.
Radio. Welcome, Stu.
Yeah, hello.
Well done. Made it right on time. Right, takes away, Gareth. You want to minimise that as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So I actually just thought I might mention a few things first. So as you know, we've got a new risk management policy, and we were just trying to think about how we could do a workshop with you. And we thought, well, let's switch it up a wee bit and think like blue sky. So starting from scratch, what is your views around where our risks are from a governance perspective? Because, you know, we do a lot of work in this space every day, thinking from a staff perspective. And yes, it was really using the new policy, using that new structure to think about what those risks might be, and kind of do it a bit fun, but bit different, and conscious that these risks, they actually get reported to the AFR every meeting, so they're in the appendix, so you can find them once that the staff have massaged over the time, and we've actually had 2 of these risk conversations during this term, so just a reminder that this is now the 3rd one. So yeah, so what's keeping you awake at night is kind of where I started from when we were talking about this conversation. And yeah, and then maybe you want to start with your slide pack there, Gareth.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. So as Catherine's pointed out, what we're hoping we will do today is initially just a very brief revisit of the risk management policy. As Catherine said, we've had a couple of workshops on this policy. In many ways, those workshops were on pieces of the policy, including tier 1 risks and risk appetites, and we've also had conversations about risk interconnectedness, which is now in the policy. We now have tier 1 and tier 2 risks. Obviously, that's in the policy as well. Audit Finance and Risk Committee it recommended the policy to council. The policy has been adopted, and your feedback has been incorporated into that. Particularly, I think it's worth reflecting on the risk appetite work we did. You challenged us to go away, have a look at that, and we brought that back to you, so you'll see that in the policy as well. So I'm not going to dwell for a long time on the policy because you have seen elements, but it will be useful just to reflect on some of the core components of the policy today. Feel free to let me know if I'm going through it a little bit too quickly, or if you want to ask me any questions or any of the elements, happy through you, Matt, to take any queries in that regard as well. So as I said, what we're hoping to do today, the agenda is broadly a short reintroduction. It will be a very short reintroduction to the risk management policy, and then we're going to do an interactive session. I will come back to, you'll see it on the wall, what we have termed the inverse target. And what we mean by that, it's a very simple tool. Hopefully you'll find it interesting, but it's also a really insightful tool, despite it being really simplistic. And the reason for that is that it enables you to, much more easily than a risk register, which is essentially a table, it provides an ability for you to evaluate relativity between risks, and that's the reason why we use this for workshops with managers and teams. So what we're doing today is probably what we do with managers and teams when we're at the outset of understanding what their risk profile looks like. So the objectives cover that off. I'm not going to talk to them. Essentially, if we have taken you through the agenda, we'll have met the objectives for the meeting today. Is there any questions on that just before I delve into the risk management policy? Through you, Mayor, happy to respond to anything at this stage.
I can keep going, mate.
Oh, just one question. Just in going through the exercise, I guess we're going to go through these new potential risks. That again, is there a chance for us to go through the risks that relate to us directly and our work, like you would with managers, but and obviously the risk of ineffective governance and the tier 2 risks associated with that, our package of things. Will there be another time to do that?
So hopefully we'll get through all of that. The intention is, and you'll see all of those targets
Okay.
already prepared over there. There are existing risks, and the one that you mentioned around ineffective governance is one of those risks.
Okay.
Just let Heath.
Oh, sorry.
That's right. You only just popped
So yeah, absolutely, we'll take you through that. So just to cover off those two items of the agenda. So we're going to ask you to identify for us, as Catherine said, the risks that are front of mind for you. We'll then have a look at our existing risks that we have at Tier 1, which is ineffective governance is one of those risks. We can have a conversation as a group then around where you think they sit. That's broadly intended.
And just look, my last comment on it would be that, to me, looking at that risk and those related Tier 2 risks is a whole workshop. Like, you could do a couple of hours with it easily with councillors. I mean, to me, this is a little bit different. So I'm just wondering if at some point we might come back and do that in more detail, looking at improving the risks and the treatments around some of those things, because I don't think we'll have time for that today.
So I guess, we're running tight to the election, so,
Yeah.
we will pick this up again post-election.
That would be
This is really just informing, what we will,
What you do.
induction and
Yeah, for sure.
taking your knowledge before you depart to what we can shape going forward.
It's coming back. It'll take the angst out of my feedback. Yeah, thanks.
So what does my team do? I head up the Assurance and Risk team in the Assurance Finance and Risk Directorate. Relatively new to the organisation. It was created through the Org Review a few years ago. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Mariano in my team. He's the internal auditor who reports to each Audit, Finance and Risk Committee meeting. I also have Bridget in my team as well, who's doing some amazing work to understand our insurance strategy and what that means for us in terms of lots of different changing and moving parts in our environment. So broadly, we describe that function, if you look at the right-hand side of this, oversight, insight, foresight. I'm not going to go through those in a lot of detail, but that's effectively what we provide to the organisation. That fits alongside our 3 lines model that's now incorporated into our risk management policy. Broadly, in the lighter blue boxes, that has historically, so assurance and risk functions have historically been about protection. So the 3 lines model historically was called the 3 lines of defence model. Broadly, audit was around finding issues and identifying mechanisms for essentially filling in gaps, holes in controls that organisations have. The box above that, protect, now is grow. We have, I suppose, as an industry, learned over many years that also risk and assurance management gives you insights to enable you to improve. It's not necessarily about finding areas of fault, in inverted commas, it's also an opportunity to continuously improve. And my team has a very close working relationship with the organisation improvement team, for example. So one of the things that they look at before they prioritise an improvement initiative is, does it relate to any risk? Does it relate to any opportunity that could be managed that's come out of either the work that I do or internal audit? So really quick refresher on definitions. I'm not going to read, you'll be pleased to hear all of these, but obviously we have risk definitions now clearly in our risk management policy. They are different from the previous versions of this policy, and we at workshops have had conversations around these, particularly as I mentioned earlier in terms of what risk appetite means for us. I'm not going to go through that because we've discussed that again, but obviously just because we're going to look in particular at crafting risks today, I will go through the risk definition because I think it's important for us to reflect on that. So risk relates to any uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, will have a negative effect on QLDC achieving its objectives. One thing just to emphasise, and I did when we discussed the risk management policy, is for QLDC, we don't include into that definition a concept of positive risk, which is actually defined in the ISO standard. We consider those to be opportunities. And the reason for that is just common use of positive risk in terms of opportunity. People would not understand what we mean by a positive risk. Again, I'm not going to go into detail around risk interconnectedness. I could talk about that probably for half a day at least. It's a subject I find really fascinating, and the reason for that is it provides really useful insights for us as an organisation. Risk management is moving very much away from line item risks, looking at each risk in isolation and reflecting on the fact that an organisation has a risk profile, and each of those risks is influenced by other risks and vice versa, and that's what I mean by risk interconnectedness. Happy to pick up a conversation on that at a later date. We probably don't have time for that today, but we are going to talk about the two different types of risks because we're going to focus on tier 1 risks today. Excuse me. We have made a decision as an organisation, and obviously we discussed that at our risk workshop, to not just split our risks into strategic and operational risks. We do have that classification, so each of our risks is considered to be either operational or strategic. But we've made a decision to consider risks as tier 1 and tier 2, and tier 1 risks are essentially those that are broad in nature. They generally require an organisational-wide response. And while the risk level might change, or the likelihood of those risks might change, they're likely to endure for an extended period of time. So that's where I think would be most useful for us to reflect on today, particularly from a governance perspective. So some things that we pick up with managers, and again, this is useful for you to contemplate today. These questions are ones that we pose with managers when we catch up with them quarterly, just to get them thinking around what might have changed in their environment. So we'll talk about what are our highest current risk, and the reason that we highlight current is, to be honest, as humans, we're not great at understanding where we sit today. Often if we've thought about controls, sometimes we inadvertently understand them to have been effective before they've been implemented. So we talk a lot around what have you done, what do you plan to do? So the 3 stages in any risk assessment is, where did we start before we considered the need to implement controls? Where would we like to be in terms of our target risk once those controls are implemented? What does that mean for us today? Where are we at on that journey at this point in time? And that's really useful for you in your roles to understand where we are today, as well as understanding where we intend to get to. And that obviously will then reflect, or should reflect, our risk appetite for any given risk. Another thing is, how do we know our controls are effective? Some controls are much more effective than others. Some require following documentation, other involve just a very simplistic example, a physical locking system that doesn't enable 2 people to be in the same piece of equipment at the same time. That's obviously much more effective because it's a physical barrier. Some of it is culture change. Obviously that's possible, but it's not as clear, it's not as black and white as some of the other things that we might do. And then who is responsible for critical controls? So if we have got controls in place, are they incorporated into their daily activity in their PD? Do they understand them? And are managers making sure that they are clear around expectations in that regard? So that's the really quick reintroduction to the risk management policy. I did say I'd go through it very quickly. Through you, Mayor, I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have in preparation for this session.
I don't know, but like tier 2 risks, who develops the plans, the treatment plans? I'm just interested in how it works in practice.
So the managers with their teams, they can allocate those to team members. We have somewhere in the vicinity of about 200 treatment plans owned by different managers or staff across the organisation.
Just that I'm just looking at the tier 2 risks that are related to ineffective governance, and we've got like a whole list of privileged and confidential draft. So I'm just wondering who's going to complete those, and is that you or is that?
It's the managers, yeah. So as I said, I think I was asked the question at the last Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, whose job is it to make sure they do that? And broadly, that's the risk manager's responsibility. So I catch up and check that managers are making progress in terms of implementing treatment plans. we escalate anything that's a concern to the LT regularly, but it is the managers who are accountable as risk owners for risks, job to implement those treatment plans.
Yeah, I'm just interested in who owns these risks. I mean, given that they're related to us, it's an interesting one, and I'm really interested in how you, because these have sat here for a long time, and there are risks that we might think exist, and who does those? Do we?
Managers, yeah,
And
without reiterating the question, it's broadly tier 1 risks are broadly general managers or tier 3 managers that manage those. So governance ones, for example, would sit with NILE in the governance space.
Okay, interesting. And do you keep a record of the progress that's made in terms of the number that are ticked off and sitting in draft and how things have progressed? Is there some piece of work on that or not yet?
So our risk register allows us to track changes and updates to treatment plans. It has a treatment plan section to it, which includes the ability for you to add tasks and track those. So if tasks are completed by team members, someone can say that they're in place and completed, and you can mark that off in our risk register. So broadly tracking those, yeah, absolutely.
And the last question, what if we note a risk, say a tier 2 risk related to ineffective governance? What would we do about getting that dealt with?
Good question. The first thing to do would be, I presume, to raise an RFS or a councillor query. Then the relevant manager would look at that. They would raise it with me. I have risks raised with me to put on the risk register most weeks.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're going to move to the slightly more interactive part of the session. So I'm just going to give a really brief overview of the inverse target, and I don't think it needs to be complicated at all. So you can see it on the wall behind us here. Broadly, it's 5 concentric rings, obviously with team on the example on the board and QLDC on the wall. The reason it's called an inverse target is the closer you get to the centre, the more likely your risk is to occur. So our risk management policy has 5 different likelihood categories that range from, as it says on the wall and on the slide. The furthest away, the 5th concentric ring, is unlikely, so less than 2% chance that the risk will happen within any 12-month period. And then at the centre, very close to the centre, you have very likely, which is ultimately anything that's likely to happen 90% or above in any 12-month period. So that's the likelihood reference. I'm just going to hand out the risk management policy at this stage because I think that might be useful for
Do you
you.
want me to hand some of
Or if you don't mind, awesome.
one of these extra
Yes,
Back pages.
Yeah. So if you have a look at the back page, as Catherine said in here, you'll find the likelihood information. And I should say, be really careful about the staples. I've tried to put sellotape over them.
Oh, I love that we've got a risk factor on that.
What risk is that?
Oh, my grab one too.
Oh, sorry.
Cutting out.
So the target is the likelihood, and then on the right-hand side you'll see the minor to extreme colours. So each of those colours represents a different consequence level. Just a reminder, if you have a look at this colourful sheet, this gives you information around different consequences by categories. These are the categories that we created with you at the risk workshop that we ran a little while ago to talk about risk appetite. So all of these have already been considered. We made a few changes based on feedback, so they reflect the feedback that we got from you. And on the other side, you'll see it's two-sided. So there's a number of categories there. It is quite complicated. The intention is that the categories on the left-hand side will guide your decision-making in terms of consequence. So the first column is the risk category. They're the ones that did carry through from our existing risk management policy, so they haven't changed.
Sorry, which ones?
The far left-hand side column.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then next to that, you'll see we've got subcategories. So these are the ones that were specifically requested of us from the council workshop to provide greater granularity for things like specifically climate change and environment were brought up as ones that needed to fit within a subcategory designation. So we now are capturing that information to enable you, obviously, or people that are looking at risks to have a little bit more information to make that assessment. It's complicated to do that at speed, so I'm not anticipating today. Feel free, if you want to delve into the consequence rating, to look at that in more detail. We can take anything new away and refine it as necessary afterwards. Broadly, from a consequence perspective, and this is very high level, if you think about something that has a minor consequence, it's something that we're not likely to be considering in a few weeks' time. We've dealt with it, we've moved on. An extreme consequence is something that's going to have an ongoing implication for us, whatever that might be, but it's likely to be with us, or at least we're still aware of it being with us for a couple of years. So that's broadly the scale you're working with, and all of the categories that we have help you define where it sits on that scale. So first thing we're going to do is we asked for some information about risk in advance of this meeting, so some of you have prepared that information. I'm going to give you bits of paper. We're going to take 5 minutes with your permission, Mayor, if that's okay. So what I'd like you to do is, on this piece of paper, you'll see that it has information for you to craft a risk. So again, we're looking at tier 1 risks. We're looking at ones that are likely to endure for a period of time. Pan organisation, so they require an organisation-wide response, and they might be strategic, but they can also be operational. So don't get constrained by it being a strategic risk. Once you write your risk in, there's 3 different components to a risk as set out in the way that we manage risks here. That's purely for consistency, but it also helps you craft a good risk that people understand. So it says, there is a chance that, ... due to ... will result in. So that's what, again, don't get hung up on that, but that's a useful way of considering how you craft a risk. If you're online, feel free to put your risk in that format into the chat, and we'll then pick it up for you. Once you've got that, on the back, if you can summarise that in a few words, because we're going to put it on the wall. So the bigger you can write your few words on the back here, the easier it will be for everybody in the room to see your risk when we put it on the wall afterwards.
Do you want to give us an example from your own imagination?
How specific?
From my own imagination now, there is a chance that I overrun in running this workshop session due to poor planning will result in the Mayor asking me to get a move on.
And on the back?
Gareth overruns on the workshop. Sure.
Okay.
That was off my head.
So I think, Gareth, we're not looking for perfection here, are we? No. We're looking for people to give ideas. So there is, in some respects, this is to sort of, I suppose, help, but we're not trying to sort of...
Is the goal to help us understand the system and what staff are going through and making these, or is the goal about actually genuinely asking us to discover new risks?
It's about the role of governance, but I think it's also, I mean, actively inviting. That's why I'm saying don't try and make your risks perfect, because some of this will come easier to certain brains than others, and we'll get a variety of feedback. But
and you're wanting a tier 1 risk rather than a... But
we're not down at the sort of the weeds.
But if we're looking at governance, would it not pay to look at a whole bunch of tier 2 risks that might impact on governance? I don't know.
Don't get hung up on tier 1, tier 2. Just think about an organisational wide governance.
A specific example that I'm going to throw to you and tell me what I should be doing.
Yep. Okay. Maybe have a go though, because I think it might be really useful if everybody understands the process that our managers go through.
Okay.
Happy to go through any example.
So Gareth, we're not limiting everyone to One, yeah.
No,
It's got a stack this.
A stack here, we're giving you one move, not to
Yeah.
add pressure, but if you need some more, just put your hand up and I'll bring some more.
There's a chocolate fish with this with most, but it's not.
There's a risk that I might not have brought a chocolate fish.
That's a real transparent risk. That's not a risk, that's a reality.
Exactly, no, that's an issue.
That's an issue. Catherine, so I see Cody's just posted a risk to be useful to chart that down.
Trying to think of one that is quite, I've put one that's not catastrophic, but the one that I'm on is quite catastrophic. And I guess then I don't quite know how to relate it back to QLDC because it's kind of so much greater than that.
Is it, maybe write it down and then have
We'll figure it out.
conversation as a group, we can all help with that, I presume.
Okay, I'll just leave that one then. Leave it blank. Will result in ...
End of the world.
To be continued.
Yeah, tune in next week.
Yeah. Do you want to pass these? Just with notes.
Sorry? I've done 2 minutes.
I'm going to give you another 2 minutes, if that's okay with the bear.
That's interesting. This is a new method for me for consequence and likelihood. Never seen it done this way. While we're waiting, Gareth, I've seen we talk in the policy about reducing consequence. Do you have a policy about the level of control needed before you're allowed to reduce consequence on your risk rating?
In terms of who's accountable for
No,
stuff.
I'm saying like if you've got an extreme consequence, no bit of paper and manuals and SOPs are going to stop, going to reduce the consequence. Do you have like a policy to say you've got to actually eliminate that event before you can actually reduce the consequence?
It comes back to the appetite, doesn't it? So if your appetite is for that to be lower, then you must have to spend some money or do something.
Oh yeah, it's hard to do.
Get
It's
down
like,
to that
obviously working in the
appetite.
mining industry, you weren't allowed, we were doing all this, you weren't allowed to reduce your consequence unless you had hard controls in place where you could set and forget them, you didn't need any human monitoring, constant playing around with it, so.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm familiar with that from an engineering environment. We take a slightly different approach. I don't think it's inconsistent though. And so we have delegation for risk owners. So I didn't touch on that earlier, but one of the things that came through from the workshop was moving to an environment where our risks sit at a certain level. They have to have certain management oversight. We've not had that before. We did talk about the potential consequence of that. I don't think we have this culture, but in certain environments, some people might downplay risks because they don't want to escalate them. So that's an issue for us, but we also then look at consequence versus likelihood, and our risk appetite, as Catherine says, tells you where we need to sit from an overarching risk rating. We don't mandate a requirement to have controls in place that are hard and fast in terms of being able to say they're absolutely 100% effective or 95% effective, because I think that would be a little bit challenging for us in terms of implementing across everything that we do.
Oh, yeah, you had to eliminate anything we'd be able to do.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So that's on page 14 is the mandatory requirement for anybody that's interested in the requirement for managers to either sign off or delegate to a clear risk owner. So we're just going through that process. We've asked general managers to review where they currently sit. Not all of them currently sit with general managers that sit high in the risk register. So we're asking them to go through that process and determine whether they're comfortable with who they've dedicated that accountability to. Is everyone done?
Done one at least.
Okay, I'm just going to come around with some that we got in advance of the meeting. I did contemplate giving them to you before the session, but I thought it might be quite useful for you to see them after you've all had a look at what you've written down. So these are ones that came through during the week. Bear with me while I hand them out. Just make sure everybody's got one.
Do you want those?
Yes, I'll collect them in a sec. Actually, Ros, do you mind collecting the ones that have just been drafted?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Seems crazy. Vacancies, Yeah, but what we're saying, that would be a moderate risk while vacancies, no, rolling, yeah, sorry, it's the turnover, not the
So, but even so, turnover of less than 10% is probably not helpful.
No.
It probably means you're not turning over enough staff through promotions or people coming in and moving out. So the healthy balance of those ones. Whether it's 10% or whether it's 12%.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, a little typo. Yeah.
Just, you're reading them so that you're aware what.
I'm just reading them.
Yeah, sorry. I'll leave you sharing today. I'll read them out.
Which is,
Is that right? I've given you,
I've just done it.
I'll read them out.
This is.
Already written it.
there you go, you see, is that your one?
Yeah, that's my one. I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Because then you can follow up.
Everybody ready to have a, sorry. Everybody ready to have a think about the risks that you've crafted? While you've been doing that, and I presume everybody's gathered what we're doing, but I'll just touch on it very quickly. So what you can see on there are our tier 1 risks. So what we've put up, no particular location outside of the concentric rings. So again, working back from the outside in, the closer they are to the centre of the target, the more likely they are to affect. And then, as you'll see on the screen in front of you, obviously the red colour is extreme, working back through various shades of orange, yellow, into whatever that colour is that looks vaguely white, off-white pink. Flesh colour, that flesh colour is minor. So you'll know, I suppose, first thing, tier 1, we don't have a lot of those. Not necessarily meaning that is something that's unexpected, but obviously most of our risks that you'll see at the tier 1 level are high. Something else we talked about, and we did have a discussion around how we do this. If you have tier 2 risks that link to a tier 1 risk, what does that mean in terms of your tier 1 risk level? So we contemplated 2 things, a judgment call as to whether that tier 2 risk influenced the tier 1 risk, so that tier 1 risk had to carry the higher of the 2, or whether you make an independent determination. So broadly, we went with the former. So in most cases, not all, and I can take you through outside of this meeting reasons where we've not done that, but mainly we have obviously linked any tier 2 risk with the consequence level. We've therefore carried that through to a tier 1 risk, when I get my teeth in, tier 1 risk that it's linked to. Hopefully that makes sense. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask each of you just to, I suppose, have a think about one of the risks that you identified in your space. We're then going to have a think about whether it's already up there, whether it's linked or overlapping one of the other risks that we already have recorded at tier 1. And also where, from a governance perspective, you think it sits in terms of likelihood and consequence. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm just going to take one for time. I think we've probably got about 25 minutes, have we, Mayor, left of the workshop?
No, you've got
An hour and a half, I think.
an hour and a half on this one.
Okay, great. All right, in which case we should have time for, yeah, a couple more, and then we're going to do a roundup. So I might start this side of the room then. If you can maybe tell us what your risk was.
Well, I'm wondering whether I might have been a bit too operational with my risks.
It's all right, just, I think that it's an opportunity to
There's
share.
no judgment.
Yeah, so one of them was about, given our decision last week, was whether or not a water services CCO would be able to operate in the timeframe by the deadline date that it needs to.
I think that's a real risk. So as a collective then, obviously that broad risk around there's a chance that we're unable to effectively set up a water services CCO by the legislative date. What do we broadly, from a government's perspective, feel around the likelihood of that? What's the likelihood that we're in a position that we haven't met our own expectations for setting up that?
So what's the timeframe again?
2 years, to July 2020.
Well, that's the date we've set. It has to be by 28, I think.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So we've set a nominal date, and we will review. Getting down to the detail, but we're reviewing that actively in terms of dates.
Right.
I think it could be, I would put it, sorry, what are we doing, consequence or likelihood?
Likelihood.
Likelihood, I would say, is reasonably high.
What, that we won't achieve it?
Well, yes, and only because, one, there may be government change, two, there may be arguing that decision as time goes on. So those sorts of risks maybe play into it. So given that it was only a 50-50, half the elected members didn't want to progress, given that there is an election, central government election coming up, we don't know what, I would say, but in terms of whether we can achieve it operationally or not, if we want to, I think that would be a low likelihood, if that makes sense. So it being achieved might be a higher risk because of political reasons, but operationally, I think it would be a low risk because I think it will be achievable.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts around where that might be? Obviously, we've got maybe two different likelihood ranges, depending on the cause of the risk. Is that
well,
reasonable?
that's
So any other comments around what you think on that?
Just to think about it in terms of the risk and consequence, I think there's a moderate likelihood there could be something that gets in the way of it. But I think the consequences of that are likely just to be further delays and further, which is what we've seen over the last 5 years. So, the chances of water reform achieving further delays through a whole range of reasons is quite likely. But the consequence of that is not particularly high in the short term because it's just not going.
Well, when you read strategic political reputation, government intervention resulting in imposition of commissioners and removal of democratically elected members, it sits in the extreme.
Yes, what happens to
So
the government?
what I heard Quentin say was that that's less about, I think you were commenting less about actions of this council, more about actions of
The executive.
central government.
No, there could be a whole range of reasons why it's delayed and it could continue to be delayed. But anyway,
because I think
so, I mean, you're taking the view that if we commit to doing something, but we don't achieve it, then something will happen to us. You've taken that view, I've taken it from a different view. So,
And then there's operational consequences from the Clean Waters perspective. Does it really make any difference? Because our CCO, it's not going to look that different from status quo potentially, other than governance. So do changes impact delivery? Is that possibly?
I mean, there's a long term, a short term and a long term consequence of that, as we know. So
the short term it might not, but long term
it would. So, the toilets will still flush in the short term, but in the long term,
why did you choose such a difficult one?
From a risk management perspective, because there was a bit of nervousness about risks. I actually think that's a really good one in terms of crafting risk. It's got some really good conversation. I think, and I don't mean to jump in, because this conversation can certainly keep going. There seems to be two risks, as you rightly point out. There's a risk that legislation stays, no changes in legislation, and then QLDC fail to stand up a water services CCO on time as per legislation, and then obviously Mayor, that triggers the consequences that you're talking about, or potential consequences that you're talking about. And then there's the goalposts change in terms of what's expected of us from central government.
So I think, as Catherine just pointed out, that's captured there.
Can you read those out? Sorry, when you point to them, I just can't.
Oh, sorry.
Without my glasses.
Yes, the risk 10019 says central government reforms impact on council achieving its objectives.
You'll only have to call the number, because everyone else will know exactly when you call the number.
In fact, just call the number and we'll know.
I think that's something straight out of science.
And we take that one on a broad level. I think that's incredible. I mean, that's what we're dealing with day to day.
That's right.
They're changing. The likelihood is.
I won't say the risk number again. Sorry.
I think might have been Nikki's point. Left to its own devices, the organisation will deliver on a CCO. So the issue is less around can we actually deliver it, because we can.
So that number
versus something else.
Versus stand up water services.
Externality getting in the way.
Yeah, on time. So do we, based on that then, do we think that this is a tier 1 risk? Or do we think the tier 1 risk predominantly sits in the change in direction or requirement.
I think it sits in that.
Well, I think it
Well,
probably
it would
sits
sit
in
in
the
a
change of
couple
direction,
because
but
it's
there's a lot of interdependencies, I think.
one's related to that and one would be something else organisational.
Political as well.
Is it organisational or is it more a political risk?
Well, there's
type
two.
organisation?
Well,
That's what we're talking about.
Well, we haven't actually kind of fleshed out the organisational things that could go wrong, have we? But ultimately, I mean, I would fit it more in that way.
Question, because obviously it's a large change. Do we have a change management policy or do we look at change management as a risk?
So I'm not sure we have a specific risk for change management. So I don't think we have a risk that's articulated to say as an organisation we don't have a change management framework. I know we do have a number of tier 2 risks that relate to ineffective change management in areas that are changing in business. So in the property and infrastructure space, we have risks around or changing in regards to moving to an outsourced model. That is something that's considered. But we don't have a change management policy that I'm aware of now.
And effective communication, and we've got inadequate workforce capacity, capability.
Well, that's
So
where
it's
that
about those. This one's
interconnect issues come in there as well.
So that speaks to your the model which interconnects various risks. So no one risk captures every aspect of the.
Well, this is the thing, is that's not a high level risk, that's more of an issue that you use these risks and this structure to deal with, isn't it? And this was what I was wondering about how this is used in practice. If you have a risk and the person who's in charge of that, say Mike, is looking at this risk, he's going, well, these are the risks that relate to this. How do I write a plan that uses the information in the risk register, in the treatment plans, to deal with this issue that might emerge? This is what I want to understand about how the system works. How do people use it in anger?
And I think it's a really good question. So I have weekly conversations with managers around, for example, and this might not be a real example, do we need to document that we don't have good change management processes across the board? However, in many cases, it's much easier to say what's the risk. So the risk is that we fail to prepare adequately for standing up a water services entity. And it's actually much better to tailor a change management plan for that specific activity rather than standing up a broad change management policy, because that policy has to cover everything that we do from a council perspective. So Mike and ELT do make a number of decisions around when we need to do that. So an example of that would be we now have an organisation performance team because we actually want to have centralised oversight of how we implement change projects across the organisation and implement improvements. We also have connected risks to that, talk about how we're going to implement process improvements, system improvements in various parts of the business, whether that's financial management, issuing dog licenses, other things that we do. Both work. My advice is always, what's most effective for you as a manager in terms of implementing treatment plans? If it's much easier or more effective to implement a treatment plan that's specific, implement the treatment plan at a level that's specific. If it's much more effective, as Mike has, to stand up an organisation performance team and have a structured approach to delivering improvements across business, then that's an effective treatment plan. So there's no one size fits all, and I know that's a bit of a get out of jail card, but that's actually how we manage our risk.
So what would you expect? And would you expect that to be a risk that crosses Mike's mind in terms of the framework and to consider the framework, and where would that sit?
I think that this is already across the minds of many people in the organisation.
On paper and in terms of having an actual plan so that, you know, it's not person specific. Someone can leave and someone can pick it up and go, this is the plan. Where does it sit? Is it a risk? Is it a plan? Is it a, what is it?
Yeah, and I agree. I think I suppose the question is, should it just be a policy around change management, or should it be an approach that's structured for moving to a water services delivery?
So in that example, there's an implementation. So out of the water service delivery plan, we create a water services implementation.
And the legislation directs you what to do.
Well, that provides some frameworks, but obviously there's a myriad of stuff that legislation doesn't necessarily point to, such as how do we deal with the staffing change, how do we deal with the allocation of technology,
which is all of those other things.
So which is key to all those other things, but I suppose, listening to the conversation, so to be fair, that water service implementation plan hasn't been built up out of someone going all the way back up to all the top tier risks and scanning all of those and saying which ones apply. It's been more driven out, we have this big humongous piece of work, how are we responding to that?
And what are the risks?
What are the risks that come through that, and what do we know that we need to address?
So I've been in AFRCs and asked many, many times about this, and you've often said, or a couple of times, Catherine said, it's an issue. We were talking about the disposal field. That's not a risk, that's an issue. Can you explain how that thinking relates to what we're doing here? Because to me, it's a piece of work, it's an issue, it's not a risk. There are risks attached to the piece of work or the issue, but this is what I want to understand, that all managers understand the difference, because it feels like you're potentially putting that up as a risk, but it's not really. It's an issue. With risks attached.
The fact that we have made a decision to stand up a water services entity has happened. We now have a number of risks, and I think the way that the risk was articulated was around our ability to do that effectively and what the consequences would be if we didn't. So from my perspective, this is crafted in the way that we worded it at the moment as a risk. Sure, everything is triggered by an event, and that event obviously is a road to follow a certain pathway in terms of water services delivery, but that creates risks that then we need.
So would the failure of the disposal field again be a risk that we should have a plan for? Because I've been told it's not, it's an issue.
Certain, not, this is uncertain, so we're uncertain whether we're going to make the time frame.
Well, I think when the disposal field starts failing, it's an issue. There are things and it's uncertain. And then you have a plan and then you follow that and you test options and so on. But if you've got nothing for people to follow, then they're just winging it every time. So I'm just trying to, I still don't understand how the system works and what is a risk, what is an issue, what is a treatment plan versus an issue plan, as in an incident plan. I don't understand how our system works. There's a difference between those things. I've been told so in public meetings.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question there that might preference? So my understanding of that one is that it's a high risk, or really very high. Our water service delivery, even with our suggested treatment plans, remains a very high risk. So we can't actually make it any higher risk, but we can start to address the issues under that risk rating, though it may still stay a high risk. Is that kind of the difference between a risk and an issue? Like, it's still, you can't make it any higher because it's pretty much as high as it goes. But we can look at resolving some of those issues, but then the risk still stays high because of the tier 1 and 2 considerations that are around that.
I still don't understand. You haven't answered the question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take it offline and have a conversation around.
I think we need to
like definitions in the PowerPoint.
We need to understand what's an issue versus what's at risk, because the risks are high level. They're broad, they affect everybody, you've said that. This is specific, it's a particular issue. So what would you expect somebody dealing with that to do with the other risks that are noted on there? And there might be other tier 1 risks that come out of going through the exercise that aren't in the system already, but that's not a risk, that's an issue with risks attached.
Yes,
and I think that's an issue. The system would basically get you to look around the risks and say which of the risks that we currently have are triggered by that or are relevant to that particular one. What are so presumably those risks at that level have various consequence levels, and then what you're doing is what we would be doing is building a response that actually that addresses the particular issue but reflects the risks that have been tagged to that issue, isn't it?
I guess my concern is the lack of clarity here. I'm concerned that managers will have it. That's why I'm asking, because do people, couldn't get a quick straight answer from people running it. So do the managers understand what they're doing with this system?
I think in my meetings with managers, to be fair, the managers are very clear around the difference between an issue and a risk. And that might be because in their space, it's much more familiar to them on a day-to-day basis what they're doing. To me, when I have the conversations, I don't necessarily dwell on whether the definition is an issue or a risk. We can refer to definitions in the risk management policy that they're there.
But I got told in a meeting.
But what are we doing to respond to it? So, as Mike rightly points out, if we have an issue at the Shotover wastewater treatment plant, it's occurred, we need to respond to it. What are we doing to respond to it? Who's accountable and responsible for making that happen? Is the way that we would manage that. We then have residual risks, Shotover.
So do we use the system to anticipate problems? So if Simon manages 3 waters, for example, is he going to look at the system and go, I've got these ongoing things and I need to look at the risks attached to each of them and put in place plans for the ones that are likely and of high consequence, so that when something happens, for those ones that are likely and of high consequence, I have a roadmap. And I pick it up and I go, right, now I know what to do. I need to ring the comms department. I need to ring this person. I need to, do those exist?
So,
and is that how we should be using it? Going down to scenarios and incidents and...
If you let me finish that, absolutely. So Simon does have risk plans in place and he's talked to those. He presented that at the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. So absolutely. Does he have issue plans to manage how he responds to what's happening at Shotover wastewater treatment plant? Absolutely. Of course he does. Would that benefit from a clearer definition around whether it's an issue and a risk? Possibly, but I'm not sure it is at the moment. I think it's relatively clear to him what he needs to respond to.
But equally, I think a lot of I'm not sure in a practical sense whether every manager sits there every day looking at an issue and referring back to the risk register. A lot of that people do by form and practice every day. So, and our processes pick up some of those things that you mentioned. Is there a comms plan? How do we ensure that we're advising our insurers? How do we ensure that we're communicating? So there's a bit to which, yep, these plans are really, really important, but actually they're also underpinned by a lot of pragmatic decision making that is made that is aligned to those, but that might not every day sit down and sort of try and anticipate every issue.
No, it's more the ones of high consequence and high likelihood, I suppose, that you would start with and then you would work your way down. And eventually you've got, something that people can pick up and run with. So a new staff member isn't starting from scratch and you're not relying on somebody's logic. You've got a system. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the risk workshops that I have with managers and the teams are very effective of understanding exactly what Mike has just articulated. What are we doing? What have we not recorded in the risk register? So can we record it in the risk register? What are we not doing that, given that we've done a risk review, we might need to pick up because we currently are not across it? That's a really effective risk conversation, and I have those all the time with the business. Yeah, so I'm not concerned about the process and we're going to understanding of it.
Just cut that conversation at half an hour, so let's go.
So shall I put this one on, just back to your point there? Extreme consequence of us failing to meet legislation in regards to this?
Yeah, okay.
And broadly, relatively unlikely, because we have systems, processes and plans in place. Okay, you're on there.
I actually had a cyber attack on my one.
So we do have that on there. I'm just going to write it much more clearly.
Yeah, I'm interested because obviously you get attacked every day pretty much, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not pretty much. We get attacked multiple times every day. Multiple times every day.
I'm not going to buy any more vouchers for the mayor.
Is that the please help me one?
Yeah. Can you? I'm in a meeting. Can you please buy me some Apple vouchers? I've had that done. I've forgotten.
Because look, so your exposure level is very high. the probability of it actually getting through the safeguards is there, what, do we get any stats on that, or just so I can get an idea of likelihood?
Yeah, I don't have any stats, but I know just recently the knowledge management team have had an external evaluation of our cybersecurity systems and processes and found us to be favourable across, I suppose, the average of local government. That is intended to be reported to you, so I can't go into too much detail because it's coming to the AFR once the report's been considered by the team. But we spend a lot of time through Ryan's team looking at what the risks might be, learning from others, making sure that we've implemented systems to respond.
That's the other fourth ring, is it?
So we've got insufficient, inadequate or failure of digital and technology systems and insufficient, inadequate or failure of information governance. So both of those either very unlikely or unlikely.
So it's really a high level of risk. It happens. It's not really a risk, it's a known threat that's constantly there. We intervene multiple times on a daily basis. If something got through, then the consequences potentially could be quite high depending on what they trigger.
Yeah, and at the moment, I suppose our risk profile, you could look at this two ways. So we have a huge volume of low consequence activity that targets QLDC because our system to manage that well. We haven't yet, touch wood, experienced the event of this. So you can actually put that on either. You could determine that you're going to do high likely, low consequence, or you can do low likelihood of high consequence and then manage both of those. So I'm happy if we want to put a cybersecurity one on to do whatever you think is most appropriate in that regard.
So for me, so first off, consequence. So we're looking at 2 weeks out, less than 2 weeks out?
Good question, because that's not necessarily my area of expertise, but I would think if it's a black swan event, based on experience with other organisations, it could be 2 weeks plus out of core systems.
It puts us in extreme. So the exposure level, it's pretty much every second of every hour, every day. You've got the probability that it gets through. You're saying unlikely.
So the other thing that we are doing is we're looking to create new pathways for backup, so including partnering with other organisations to reduce the risk that if it does get corrupted, that we are offline for. So as part of our business continuity planning is to ensure that those systems, whether we're put offline by malevolent acts or by acts of God, that we minimise the time that we're unavailable.
But there's also personal information that they could data mine as well.
Yeah, and I mean obviously we tackle that through the work of the privacy officers and obviously the work that we do to from a data management point of view, and we're constantly reminding staff our systems are constantly designed to only collect the data that they're required to have and not to hold it. But yes, there's always a risk that someone might get through and have their data corrupted or exposed.
You're just looking at our risk matrix table. I'm either moderate extreme or unlikely extreme, which is either in the high, the orange, or the bright red. For me, that's me. Have a look at it.
I'll put that up and then if anybody's got any alternative views. So we're saying extreme and we're going to try and wedge it in around here. So towards unlikely. Good. Happy with that? So.
Yeah, I think my brain's one of those ones that's probably moving a bit slower in this space, trying to understand it all, but probably a bit more straightforward here. There is a chance that ongoing development/projects due to infrastructure inadequacies, apologise if I spelled it wrong, will result in continued community fallout.
So we do have a tier 1 risk. I'm just looking for it first.
What number is it, Gareth?
21.
Yeah, that's one.
21, there we go. Ineffective operations, maintenance, or renewal of property or infrastructure assets leading to failure. So that one's already been up there. It's currently obviously a very high risk rating, and also a very high likelihood. So that one's on there already. Are you comfortable that that reflects what you meant by that risk though?
Yeah, when I was circulating the board there, that's where I eyeballed.
The risk question you won.
Thank you.
Any comments, suggestions around where this sits?
I mean, one of the things I'm struggling with is that, and you take even cyber attack, for instance, or there's such a spectrum of small to big in any of these, and they can be from 3 minutes to 3 weeks or 3 years in terms of the fallout of them. And the same with this is we've got some things going, oh look, a drain hasn't been cleared and therefore it doesn't work and you get a bit of surface flooding, the guy comes clean, 2 hours later you're fine, versus the entire southern corridor coming to a grinding halt because we haven't got money to invest in the transport infrastructure. You know, there's such extreme ends. I find it hard to sort of to even categorise them because of that.
But that's the issue. The issue would be, you know, if the strategic risk, the high level risk is probably at a certain point. You know, if you're talking about catastrophic failure, then that's significant and extreme. But then if you have an issue, then it relates to these risks, and then it would have its own.
Well, I suppose
all the risks
what I'm saying is that having likelihood without consequence, without level of consequence, I think is the difficulty.
But it's issue versus risk is the thing. Each issue.
It's not issue versus risk. There's an issue and you determine the risk from that issue.
Yeah.
Based on the risks in the system. Or again, it's just figuring out how this works in practice.
So the rest of
for the start.
they're a bit of a pre-population, aren't they, to help you respond
So,
to the issue?
am I right, Gareth, to say, from a real simplistic point of view, in the old system, if you're just doing a job hazard analysis, issue in the old terms would have been hazard. You would have said hazard, and then you would have determined the risk from the hazard. Is that
Not all
right
issues
to
are
say?
hazards.
I know, that's why they've changed the name.
Some hazards are issues, but some issues will not be hazards, they will be something else.
Yeah, so particularly in health and safety and engineering space, they use the word hazard. More broadly, we sit in the likelihood and consequence. And this is always a challenge. Obviously, you can't really choose, to your point, a consequence and then try and retrofit a likelihood. Those things need to be considered together. So I get that that's a challenge for us. You can also analyse, and I'm not recommending we do, but you can analyse the minor consequences and then have a look at those in terms of likelihood and then look at the major consequences.
So if we take Ferg and Quentin's sort of common sort of issue. So as Quentin rightly said, at one level, like the drain blocks. So, you know, effectively that's a daily. It's an issue. If it happens, it's an issue. There's a common likely risk, but equally there are well-established procedures, SOPs, requirements on our contractors, etc., to take that risk down to a point where it's minimal. The other one, at the other extreme, which is Ferg's, is okay. We don't have, or in fact, you use community feedback, but you know, effectively, we don't have enough infrastructure in place. And, you know, so some of the things that are driving that are massive externalities, the government's fast-track legislation. Bang, there's a whole 1,000 more houses to make provision for. It's the appetite by council to extend our borrowing. So we've got council saying we don't want to borrow more, although borrowing is the way to get capital to build these things. There's also what is the impact on the rates impact. So there's your community feedback around the tension between getting on top of infrastructure versus people saying, I don't want to have to pay more rates. So these are, I suppose, and even in that simple example, there are multiple drivers that play into creating both the risk or the issue and the risks associated with that. It's a similar situation with us acting as a PCBU. There are multiple risks or issues, And this is agreed to what is the risk tolerance to hold those risks in place, and what are the roles that are given to people and the freedom to actually resolve those.
So when you do, I'm just thinking of using this too in our risk reporting. So when we do a report to council on any issue, there's a risk category, right? And you go, this relates to risk number, blah, 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 blah. The risk is high, the recommended option will maintain the risk at the current level. We read that all the time. But obviously there are issues involved with the recommendation and the report. They won't necessarily sit at the same level as the overall risk. I'm thinking in practical terms of how we as people reading the reports go, oh yes, that's a good risk analysis. That points out the practical risks to me. Oh, the political ramifications, but it's never like that. We get one, maybe two risks. The risk level is always the risk at which it's labelled in the register, despite the fact that it's talking about an issue that relates to that risk. Can you explain how staff use this to give us meaningful risk information in our reports?
So very quickly, obviously the report requires staff to pick at least one tier 1 risk. And the reason for those is that they're the ones that obviously have the broad impact that are more likely to be useful for government. As you rightly pointed out, in some cases, I would say quite often, our reports do include additional risks that sit either at tier 2 or possibly 1 or 2 tier 1s. If that's not effective, then happy to pick that up with Nine and governance and have a look at that. But the intent is absolutely to provide information that's useful to governance in understanding how the information in the report.
Given this discussion and where it's going, I think it could be better. I think it could be less tick box. Yes, we've gone and it says we have to label the risk and write it down and say it maintains it at the same level. I think we need more in that space.
And maybe it does.
And I think it would help staff to use this more effectively. If it's not just a tick box, like we have the system, great, because the AFRC is always very happy. It's like, we're at this high level, we just need to know they have a system. I don't function like that. I want to know the system works. I want to know that it's workable and that people are using it. And I'm just struggling with that at the moment.
Yeah, and as I said, I'll take it away.
Yeah.
What I would say is I have lots of conversations around the risk content in reports. So my experience is that it's not a tick box exercise, but if it's not providing what governments need, have to take that away.
No, so it's 10 past. You want to
Thanks, Gareth.
Continue on, or what are we?
Yes, is that okay?
Yeah, you go for it. Yeah.
Okay, it might need to be a little bit quicker.
Not for me quickly, it was better. So. Sorry.
I'll keep it to a really.
He's a risk.
I think back to sorry.
Which means I'm done.
Yeah, I'm spoken now.
So I'm going to stick to a super practical one and a what I'd call a real risk, and it's if the MRF breaks down. And so, sorry. Oh, okay. So yeah, I know, but I mean, this is the point: is that we know it's getting old. We know it's there's a whole bunch of reasons that it could break down. The consequences of it breaking down are quite high because we lose the effective recycling system. We lose reputational risk of we can't achieve our policies and objectives around waste minimisation and a whole we're going to manage the landfill. So there's a whole bunch of consequences for it. So
I suppose that's the question. So absolutely that risk exists at tier 2 in our risk register, and we've linked it. I say that with certain, I would have to check that, but I'm pretty sure we would have linked it to this risk, which we've just touched on. So this is the risk 21, just to remind everybody, ineffective operations, maintenance or renewal of property and infrastructure assets leading to failure. So obviously, like the wastewater treatment plant example, that's an example of an asset that we run for the community. The risk from how you articulated is that it fails and then that's for us.
So I'm just trying to think about how those other things relate. So you've got one above there that talks about strategy for growth, but presumably there's things like the waste minimisation strategy or other council policies. So not achieving that obviously comes in there somehow.
Yeah, so obviously there's a planning. We touched on this earlier, there'll be a connected risk in there at tier 1 around the ability to be able to afford what's in front of us. So there'll be a financing and funding risk, which we have at tier 1 as well. And that's, I suppose, Quentin, that's where we talked earlier around interconnectedness. So at the end of the meeting, we're just going to very briefly touch on the information that we'd like to give you in the future, give the AFR in the future, which will give you the ability to see those interrelatedness, because I get your point, the specific may not be clear to you, but it's a tier 2 risk that's obviously linked to several risks.
I'll let you move on just because I'm conscious of time, but just at a high level, I say, look, I understand this as a way to understand a super complex risk environment. I wouldn't say, just trying to understand how you apply that to real circumstances, the bit I'm struggling with.
Okay, so, well, we could easily do it. I could just go around now. What if the myth broke down is on a reputational level, how would you feel? If the myth broke down, how would, on a reputational level, I'm a political, as a politician, how would you feel?
I'd be very.
Well, I'd feel frustrated because...
Yeah, but if you were going from minor to extreme on those headings, on the consequence, how would it affect?
I think it would be probably significant.
Okay. What would you feel about it?
I don't understand why we're doing that.
No,
the point is, how do we use the system to minimise risk?
Quentin asked the question, how do you use it in practicality? You work it out as a group. You just go through and each of us will have a different risk appetite and see what the consequences is on us individually. And as a group, we'll come up with the right answer. So that's how you work it out.
Identify the significance of the risk.
Yeah.
But I mean, that
you're like, I would probably go to major to moderate. Because it'll go through the press for about 2 weeks and then we just get on with it. So that's the...
What we're identifying is the risk.
Yeah.
Once we work out the controls, the processes, then there's got that residual risk.
So you truck the glass to Timaru,
but it's hard to separate, and this is why I think, your point is, look, on a personal level, you go, this is really important to me, but I don't want it to happen, but it's not life-threatening. No one dies if the nerve breaks down. And so this is the weird thing. And, and people can mostly go about their daily life if the road breaks down, but the operation doesn't. It's a tricky thing. It's a really important thing, but it's not.
I think what this exercise highlights is that it's very humbling because the space that you work in shows basically the limitations of the human mind, and it's an academic exercise. So,
it's based on one critical assumption on each individual risk topic. You have to be a matter expert. If you're not a matter expert to determine risk and the consequence and likelihood, that's where it falls down.
Yeah,
but it also depends on.
So for me, I think what I would like to understand from a governance perspective, so it's more pragmatic, is that some of the things that we kind of traversed today is like the issue and connecting the risks to an existing issue, because that's kind of propped up quite a lot for us as in governance. So to me, the way to proceed with that is to have early optionality on scenarios, which you say exist to a degree, like, the minor to major consequences, but we don't see that early on in optionality, or I haven't witnessed that to date that I can think of.
What do you mean you haven't seen any plans for different scenarios?
Scenario at optionality of minor to major consequences of an existing issue, for example. That's something we can all get our heads around. Right?
I mean, in terms of bringing it to a meeting, maybe, and
to governance.
Yes, to governance when we're making a decision, saying.
So what I mean by that is, if we were to say, okay, we've got this existing risk, it feels to me like the times that that's been a risk to us and have been identified as risk, it's gone from 0 to 100 quite quickly. And what I would have preferred to have seen is kind of some scenarios of minor to major consequences. So what I don't understand is the pragmatics of, I understand the academic exercise of all of this. What I'd like to see for our future council is more of what we're doing today, because I think that's great, because what it does is it highlights and it daylights things that we don't understand, and it highlights opportunities to go forward. So I think this is fabulous, thank you. But I think in terms of, what does governance actually do? They need to A, understand it, which is if this is helpful for as an exercise, and B, they need to be able to make decisions, which fundamentally I think keeps existing outside of this risk assessment. So our decisions end up being not part of the scenario analysis. Do you see what I mean?
Sort of, because the risk sections are so small. When you give us options, risk doesn't feature in those options assessment. So we have pros and cons, but risk doesn't sort of make its way in there. Is that what you may be talking about?
Well, I mean, if we think about the wastewater treatment plant, it went from 0 to 100 quite rapidly, considering that we were aware of the issue for a very long time. And I understand, because we have had inside information about those issues, I understand why that was the case. But what we didn't do at a governance level, at least, is understand any optionality.
It went from nothing to, we found out after, so it was too late to fix, or so we were told.
So I suppose in response to this, so I disagree with that. I think councillors were advised. But we also went into a process to try and manage the risk as we saw it at the time. And we're still working through the consequences of that to come out the other side.
Had it never come to a full council meeting?
But I mean, I think talking about moving forward though, it's, I don't know, I think that would be helpful, but the level of work involved in that is great, but it's not necessarily great if you refine it to existing issues, and if maybe they're highlighted better for governance.
So I think one of the questions you're asking though is, what's an issue?
Yeah.
What issue?
First,
because we probably
there's
face
so many.
hundreds of thousands of issues every day, and you're not going to want that. So what are the issues? And I think the other thing that you've got to also remember is none of these live in isolation from each other. So ultimately, at the end of the day, there's only so much the organisation has capacity to do, as it's funded to do. Therefore, you're making trade-offs as well. So if you said to us, we've now looked at the
But that is part of the whole assessment evaluation though.
No, it's part of what you do.
Well, no, it's not, because, hang on.
Well, hang on, you didn't even hear what I was going to say.
High consequence.
You didn't hear what I was going to say.
Just let Mike finish.
Sorry.
Now I've lost my train of thought. But no. So, I mean, effectively what you're doing, and particularly through your annual budgeting rounds, is saying we have issues, we have circumstances, we have investments, we've covered quite a range today, but we don't have an unlimited ability to resolve them all. So we have to accept high levels of risk in some if we're going to prioritise resolution of others.
And is it not about us seeing that? So through something like the long-term plan, we would like to see more detailed scenarios around, because you're going to be focusing on the high consequence, high likelihood, or just the high severity, high consequence stuff.
High risk.
Risk is consequence and likelihood.
Yeah, but
right? So,
you can have high consequences and low consequences.
So anyway, so we don't lose track. But it's a case of how do we use this information to make better funding decisions? And not so that it just sits with an ELT or the staff and they go, we think this is the best thing to do. How do we know that the exercise has been gone through so that we're putting the money in the right places? To me, governance needs more of that information to understand that the process has been gone through, that this has been used, and that we then have that information in front of us to make a decision, because normally we just assume that the staff have done that. But I think we probably, if we're doing good governance, need to see more. And I think the fact that we want a technical board over 3 waters and we want stronger governance points to the fact that we don't need to do that. We need to probably ask you to provide some of that stuff so that we can lift our governance.
Design mechanisms through the asset management plans, which talk about the age of the asset, and that's, I guess, risk. If we start the assets, then you're not going to, so there's part of that. We do have an audit and risk committee, finance risk committee, where you can request deep dives into risks, which we've had reporting come back to that committee on different risk topics. So you're more than welcome button to request it through that committee.
But through the long-term plan process, that's one of our big things, right? The LTP. So I'd be really interested to understand how our decision-making via the LTP and yours can be improved through the use of this system. And using it to anticipate and minimise risk, because I think we're often behind, things will happen and we'll deal with it, but we actually have to be using this sort of thing to anticipate where things might go wrong and to be prepared. And look, I'm not saying it should be in place now, I'm just saying, are we moving to that?
I mean, a long question, so I'll
Yeah,
try and
sorry
answer
again.
the final part of that, but certainly from my perspective, every time we consider a project or putting into a long-term plan, risk is a core component of that. Is it perfect in terms of how we document that? Sometimes it is, sometimes it can be improved, and I suppose that's the journey that we're going on in terms of the risk framework. I think it's fair to say we've got extremely better as we've moved through the last few long-term plans. I've been here now probably 3, if not 4 long-term plans, and every time we do a long-term plan, our risk analysis up front and the information that we bring to government is significantly greater than it has been before. Now, but as I said, are we perfect? No. Can we improve, and are we intending to improve? Yes. I probably don't have anything more for you at the moment other than to say absolutely you can take that away and work with the long-term plan team to make sure that that continues to improve.
But I think to Catherine's point with asset management plan and the long-term infrastructure plan, they are all significant tools in how we're reporting to council. Across the organisation, we've got staff looking at big asset registers, reporting those up, making, I suppose, technically based, decisions and judgments about that.
Which would be
to
inform,
this.
Because the treatment plans for some of those would include the asset management plans.
Yes, they would, absolutely, getting the asset management plans up to date, getting the renewals up to date. So there's a whole raft of things which go back and forth. And I think you made an interesting point about the water circular, and one of the reasons we have that whole debate is that government has looked at local councils and said politically over decades councils have not made the right decisions about where they're going to invest in those assets, and actually taking them out of that political environment in the mind of the government basically creates a decision-making framework where those decisions about water are not complicated by decisions about voting or about parks or about something
But what
else.
if politics exists at the executive level? Because we don't talk about that. I mean,
I think these guys want to give us an update.
Okay, hang on, we have talked. I know you've only got 5 minutes, that's all right, mate.
Absolutely. So, me and Catherine were just talking about that. Obviously, really useful conversation that could probably continue for a long time. So, I acknowledge that I've not been to all of the fuel risks. We've obviously recorded those. Sounds like a conversation that is worth picking up. Which we intend to. So as Catherine said at the introduction, this is a session for us to glean information from you and then obviously continue a conversation with the new council, and all of the information we've gleaned today will be really useful for that. Apologies that we didn't get to where we wanted to today. Obviously the risk that I flagged early on eventuated and became an issue, so apologies for not being able to run to time.
So it was an issue?
No, we realise
It's a known issue.
We realise
just before we round out, I know Stuart and Heath are online. Stu, do you want to say anything on how you see the framework? And
yes, well, as it's been said, it's we started behind the pack, but we've certainly there's been some good work going to it, and it will continue to do so. It was good just hearing the discussion today, and certainly from the audit and risk, we'll play our part as the governors require.
Thanks, Stuart.
With your permission, Matt, can I just take us very quickly through what I touched on earlier, which is what we intend to report. This is just the content of risks. I'll be really quick if I can. So that's the contents that we're looking to report on. So essentially focusing on very high and high risks as priority. This is what you currently get. So I still think this is a useful summary. It lists all of the tier 1 risks by strategic risk and then by operational risk. All of the different colours take you through inherent through to target risk rating, and what we've added recently is the risk appetite information that we worked on collectively through a workshop, so that will stay. This is new, so we have taken ELT very recently through this. This is additional information. So the intent is that we provide you with information around treatment plans where obviously in the case of the example here, we have an inherent risk very high on the right-hand side. Obviously that information is very useful for you, but you also have the long description in terms of how we articulate that risk. That follows the structure we asked you to follow today, so there is a chance that due to will result in. And as you can see here, we've got 10 treatment plans against this risk. What I will do, and obviously I'll get feedback as we go, I'll pull the ones up that I think are most useful for governance. I think if I gave you 10 treatment plans, it would be probably too much information for you, but that's the initial dashboard summary.
Down the side. And then down the side, so with those controls treatment plans, we get down to a high, but your target is moderate. So there needs to be either further investment or a further refinement on that target. Risk appetite.
Yeah, and then this is static. We're actually working in a system called QMU, which enables us actually to interrogate that data. So what I will be able to do for you is pull up all of the information around the connected risks. You can see how they're connected, what the influence is one way or the other, what that means for us in terms of treatment planning. Again, as an organisation, I want us to start thinking around how we target connections between risks rather than the one-to-one relationship between treatment plans and risks. That's proven to be relatively ineffective. It's a lot more work to do it that way. So, yes, sorry, Mayor, just a really brief summary around what we're hoping to bring to you today.
I thought that was one of the electrical, Mayor.
I like this number 13.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, team online. So before Alison starts, I think it's actually quite timely because one of the things we referred to in the previous conversation was that one of our key ways of actually making sure that the right decisions are being made and the right options are being given to you is by actually having long-term strategic asset management. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Asset management is definitely a risk mitigation, and if you do it well, it can really work. So thanks for having me here to talk about the asset management policy. Hopefully this one will be a little less controversial than talk about speed management. It is a fairly, making sure we've got, I'll talk through the policy, right? So I'm here today to talk about the asset management policy, which is a key element of strategic asset management. And today we're talking about asset management that's done across the organisation, mainly through property and infrastructure, but also through community and services. And so this piece of work is a joint work between P&I and community and services. Yeah, so really collaborative working that I think has been really successful. We're looking forward to talking to you about it. So the purpose of asset management is to deliver fit-for-purpose integrated asset management that supports the well-being of an evolving community whilst balancing levels of service, risk and efficiency. There's a lot in that statement, and we'll just talk you through if I can make this work. Here we go.
So that's like Tony Picker.
Excuse me. I feel like that's not. Here we go. So so today just going to take you through the policy and a bit about the strategic asset management plan, and talk about. We're just heading to full council on the 4th of September, where we'll ask you to revoke the current policy and adopt the new one. Asset management needs you. And I think I just wanted to do a really quick talking around the asset management framework. I know it's something that we kind of throw around the word asset management, but what does it actually mean and what are people's roles in it? So asset management is not just done by the people who have asset management in their job title. It's something that covers everything that we do at council is essentially asset management. And the role of the asset management team is to make sure that all those elements are in place and they're actually talking to each other. And so it covers a whole different, so it talks about the stakeholders, it talks about how do we fit in with our organisational objectives, but actually how do we deliver on those organisational objectives, and how do we balance the level of service or the performance with cost and risk. So risk is absolutely at the heart of what we're doing within asset management. And I really like this diagram on the right, which is not one that you see often, and it talks about the kind of the capabilities model. And so this is talking about the inputs that leadership and governance bring to this, which is why your role in asset management is really important as well, and how it fits together with all these different elements, having good information systems, having good risk management, having good, outcomes and objectives is really part of the whole big picture. So what is an asset management policy? So the asset management policy itself is a set of guiding principles and goals that relate to what we want to do. It is not just a nice to have document. It's not the most interesting to read, but it's actually a core requirement of an international standard 55001. And that's important because we're really aspiring to do good best practice asset management. And the way to do that is to follow all the different elements, and it's made up of a huge system. We talk about a system of asset management. It's not talking about the information system, but it's talking about all those diagrams in that first screen. And a good asset management policy, it boosts efficiency and it sets the executive mandate because it defines roles and responsibilities. And it's supposed to bring that all together and talk about how we actually going to do what we say we're going to do. So the document itself sounds perhaps very aspirational, but it's supported by a strategic asset management plan, which actually talks about how we're going to operationalise that policy. So just where we are today, we have a policy that was approved in 2016, so it's quite some time since this was updated. There was an informal update done in 21 that didn't go through a governance process. And actually the policy stood pretty well the test of time, but just the organisation's moved on a little bit. So what this new policy does is integrate our strategic asset management plan, which I'll come to a little bit more in detail. It really clarifies the way that this is not just a P&I policy. It's one that we're working really closely with community and services and their asset groups. And you know what, I forgot to introduce when we started, but I've got, you all know Adrian. So Adrian is, I guess, you're the contracts and asset manager all tied together for parks, aren't you really? Although not your job title.
That's right, we're bundled. So contracts, operations and assets.
Yeah, and Morgana's our Free Waters asset manager, so quite new to the role, so she's just embedding herself.
Behind.
So good.
And behind you, Alison?
Oh, sorry, and we've got Mike, who's our even newer transport asset manager, and Joey, who's our asset technician. So they're just here to, I guess often the team doesn't get a chance to see some of the governance parts of the organisation, so we thought it was really important to bring them all along.
Assets in the room.
And Mike Express recently jumped ship from Dave Wallace's team in engine approval. So, yeah.
Sorry about that. And so the policy just clarifies those roles and responsibilities, and it also formalises what we're calling the Asset Management Steering Group, which is an operational group. We have an informal, what we call a forum at the moment, which gets together all the asset management staff across the organisation, regardless of which directorate or what team they work in. And it's that informal one is about sharing ideas, sharing tools and software, and trying to bring together the organisational kind of artefacts that you need to do best practice asset management. But what we wanted to do is formalise that in more an operational group and actually have a report into ELT to say, actually, as an organisation, strategic asset management needs to be done at an organisational level. So we need to pull together all the good things that are happening across the organisation and learn from them. Jumped ahead of myself. So this is the operational steering group, and so again I touched on reporting to ELT, and it's about the fact that asset management is about continuous improvement. So how do we work together? How do we share? How do we actually bring everyone up? So we do asset management maturity assessments every 2 years for each of the activities, whether it's parks, three waters, roading, solid waste. And some activities score a lot higher in different areas. And what we want to do is kind of have a cross-pollination, you know, why does one department or one team do really well in this but not in the other? And so it's about sharing those ideas and actually having a strategic approach to improving rather than just kind of hoping for the best. So what's a strategic asset management plan? The asset management plan operationalises all those aspirations that we see in the policy. And we quite often see policies come through and it's like, how do you actually make a policy achieve what it intends to do? And that's what's set out in the SAM. The SAM is really kind of an internal document so that our executive team particularly can ensure that we're doing what we need to do things well. And so it kind of has it states how we're going to do certain activities. It then does a bit of a gap analysis to say, you know, here's one element of the business that we've looked at. This is each of the activities are doing this and this activity, but this one's not doing so well. So we document where we're not doing well and how we're going to get there. And I can talk through that. So yeah, documented information that contains and aligns asset management policy, objectives, strategies, and approaches for developing each of the portfolios within that overarching asset management system. So, yeah, these are some of the key parts of the SAM. So we talked about how it aligns with the organisation's objectives, how it's going to guide the organisation to establish and apply a framework for decision making. So we basically have to set out each of the different areas of operating and what are the decision-making processes that we do, you know, whether it's renewals or just giving an overview of our CapEx program, you know, this stuff. So it's a lot of really useful information in there. And providing some organisational context that we all know about. You know, we talk about growth. It kind of gives you an overview of the key context within the organisation, and its real function I talked about earlier is the improvement plan. How are we going to? What is the current state, and how are we going to get better at doing what we do? And designed to try and get consistency between each of the asset management plans for each of the activities. So the strategic asset management plan that we're working at now is really just trying to capture all that information, and we've found a lot of gaps in the information that we know and the information that we know that we don't know. And so it's trying to take a bit of an iterative approach, and in between each of those kind of final documents, you know, we'll be looking at our improvement plan and really trying to drive those improvements and bring some consistency. A lot of this was written before, I guess, the decision on the CCO, so I'm talking about three waters, but I guess that may change how we approach that, and that's where we are now. So I guess I just wanted to give a little bit of an update on that strategic asset management approach. So I know Gareth talked about the risk team coming together out of the P&I review, out of the QLDC review. The strategic asset management team came out of the actual P&I portion of the review that followed after that one, and it really recognised that we were doing asset management differently in each of our activities. So we had really strong area in some parts of the business and others were less. And so the idea is to try and get a more strategic approach to improving what we do. Part of that is making sure that we have certain artefacts in accordance with the international standards, so making sure you have an asset management policy, making sure you have a strategic asset management plan, making sure you're actually reviewing the things that you have and asking yourself, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? And then just having visibility of, you know, your finances, you know, how they're linked to your levels of service and, you know, the cost level of service and risk conversation that Gareth talked about. And actually, do we have good data? Are we using that data well? Do we even know what our assets are exactly, where they are, the condition they're in, how old they are, and what are we doing with that information to do some of our predictions and to address what the need will be in the future? Again, improved risk management is a real part of that. Linking that nicely, we didn't plan that, continuous improvement. So just to give you an overview, we've got 5 AMPs. They're both of those are sitting in P&I. We've got the parts one there. Adrian always is trying to save ink for the Save the Environment ink, the picture on the front. And so at the moment, they're all sort of in various levels of quality. And what we're trying to do is remove some of the sort of the bump that gets repeated in each of those documents, move that into the strategic asset management plan so that each of those individual plans can focus on what's really important for those asset portfolios. Trying to make sure that the content is similar so that if someone picks up one, they know where to find the information, particularly if, people like yourselves got lots of documents to go through. How can we make these? And we're also looking at some other formats. So these are a traditional, Word document that we provide as PDFs, but we've got a bit of work happening in the background to make them a little bit more interactive on a Power BI dashboard. So just a reminder of what an asset management plan is. It's a strategic and tactical document that actually sets out your 10-year investment program. So it's basically the evidence that you would need to know that your long-term plan is robust and is meeting the needs of your community with a good level of service that cost and risk is built in. Wanted to ask you.
Oh, can you tell? I'm just thinking in line with the LTP, when does it get updated so that it feeds into that process? Is that right before?
It should do, yeah. That's how it would ideally work. And unfortunately, it doesn't always happen in that way. The one, so in the transport space, we have to submit the AMP as part of our application for funding. So that gets submitted in the December prior to the LTP year. So we try and go to those deadlines, but often the others are less clear.
Okay. It also rolls up into the 30-year infrastructure plan as well, which is also has to be done for the LTP.
As part of the LTP.
So this is operational, but feeds into a decision-making framework for governance. How do we, I don't know.
So I would love to
just trying to understand them.
I wouldn't say this is operational. This is very much about using an evidence-based approach to manage our long-term assets.
I'm just meaning there's no decision at the governance level around the asset management plan.
So I would love to see us, we haven't done that well, and that would be something that I would want to see a more formal process for adoption of an app.
Okay, so that could be part of that
I would suggest it's probably more a tool. And I mean, Adrian's team I would use as a great example because a few years ago we had a renewals budget for tracks and trails. We just sort of did whatever. He's gone away, worked out how much asset we've got, how many trails, what grade they're at, what the renewal cycle's necessary to be, and then he's come back to us with a budget. And said, this is how much you need, and then we've obviously had to make some other decisions around that. So I wouldn't say that.
Well, I don't know.
But that's the story that the AMP should be saying.
Good example. Well, the other corollary of that is it should introduce discipline. So it should stop erratic things jumping in and diverting critical funds away from an asset management regime. And we know, politics is politics, so that will always be an element of randomness that politicians bring to that. But this should basically provide a very clear structure about what is best for business in terms of management of our core assets.
There'll be some decisions maybe around levels of service and
but that's separately.
Levels of
service is separately decided by council.
But but not in a practical sense. Like if you went through an asset management plan, you could actually, really practically work out, because you said all those things feed in at that previous diagram, right? Risk levels and so I don't know. I'm not saying what it should be. I'm just saying we've never approved them before. They significantly drive the LTP, or they did the last one, especially when you look at the operational budget.
I thought this might be a nice example. So this is a straw man of a more interactive app. So this is our transport app, and we've basically taken our paper run and put it into the Power BI dashboard. But the idea of this is that this would be used as a mechanism for you guys as governance to understand, we talk about this connection between risk, level of service and cost. And so what we do is we have our budget categories down here, and then we have our level of service here, and then we look at it versus the level of service, the cost and the risk. So you all know, I mean, you know, that when you spend more money, you're going to get a higher level of service, you're reducing your risk, but you obviously, there's an affordability aspect to it.
Which is another risk, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, and so we're trying to understand that if you look at, so this is renewals, for example, and these numbers are actually not concrete yet, it's a straw man. What it would enable you to do is look at different scenarios and say, in this particular area, so we're talking about the road surface, actually you might take a low risk approach and make sure you're really protecting that particular asset type. But there might be others when we look at footpath and you'd run a different scenario. So it's saying like, you know, A, B and C, these are the options that we have to invest a lot of money, a reasonable amount of money and no money. And then what impact is investing that level of income on your LTP? So this would link back to your LTP.
Does it really help make decision making more?
Well, but what is that it does? It already does, and this is the point. It already does.
Understanding the decisions that we're making, the community understanding.
Roading's a great example because we always get pushback saying, "Why did you reseal that road and do a reseal on that road?" And it's like it didn't have any potholes in it. It's like, well, we don't wait until we get potholes to do the renewal because of the long run.
So this is just meant to be a representative tool to be able to have these types of conversations. Right. We want to increase the level of conversation with you guys so that when you're making decisions about which LTD lines you're increasing or decreasing, actually there's a real justification. What is the impact on the level of service?
But there's always a degree to which things are rolled up. You've rolled it up to footpaths, roads, parks, different types of parks.
Yeah.
You know, if it's disaggregated to a point of stupidity, then we'll never make any decisions. So there's a natural aggregation, and I think part of the work that Alison has been doing is saying, you know, what are the asset classes, as you said, or what are the subsets of assets that actually meaningfully we can make consistent decisions around, because we can't have a footpath in Milwaukee versus the footpath in Wakatipu versus the footpath in Arthur's Point all being treated differently.
Yeah, so exactly, and I think this is to take more of a strategic approach to it. So, you know, again, this is just those individual budgets rolled up, so we can say we've got a preferred program where we think that this level of budget is going to help us achieve the level of service that we're after. But actually, if we have and often, so this is really important for our discussions, particularly with NZTA, because, you know, we have to really fight hard to get the money that we get. And often, you know, we're sitting in a preferred program with what we would call aspirational, but often we end up with the do minimum. So, but then we can...
Or less.
Often. But it's just, I guess these are just tools that I actually didn't mean to go into detail in these, but I think it's just how do we articulate the impacts of the decisions that are made at a government level, and that's what the asset management plan really should be about. Instead of highlighting the background. But I'll just jump, sorry. So these, the slideshow. So so just talk about what an asset management plan is. So in the slideshow, I've put the links to that. So here we've got the link to the online, we've got the traditional AMP, I've got a link to those digital AMPs, and the transport one's a little bit more mature than the Three Waters one. And then we've got our AMP at a glance, which is your asset management plan snapshot. So that's for each of the plans that we've got, and they're all, as you'll see, it demonstrates the variability and the quality and maturity, I should say. Some really good information, even in the least kind of flashed looking one.
Oh, this is good. Cody will love this.
So look, I just really wanted to give you an overview. I'm hoping that you had taken the chance to read the asset management policy, but it just really, I guess, talks to some of those artefacts that we need to do as part of that international standard. But if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out, and it'll be going, the report for adoption will be going to the September meeting.
That's great.
Thank you. Sorry, I rushed it a little.
Power BI interface and all that, once it's all up and ready, and you're happy with the data and all that, will that be open to anyone online?
Absolutely,
I mean, and capital program, so once we build a new asset, how does that get integrated back into AMP?
So again, I mean, we take all the data and it gets absorbed into our information. Oh, yeah, so we just update the numbers. We've got files of, in the actual AMP itself, there's tons of facts and figures, sitting in the background, and we just add them in. Yeah. But that's all there for you guys to have a look at. Got feedback, let me know. It's not perfect, so, but it's out there.
Oh, it looks.
Feed into, if we ever went to a digital twin.
Oh, well, don't get me started on that. There is a lot of work we could do in that space, and it would be awesome if we could get there. But it takes a lot of time and money, and I've got in the back of my head a bit of a digital strategy developing about how we can get there. So I think that'll be a cool direction.
Send a shuttle down the seas.
I think the trouble with digital twin would look sexier than us.
Yeah, probably will. But think of it, and the virtual visitors might not come here in reality, but that, Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.